We're live and we're ready to go. Oh.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to UPC committee meeting. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge that we meet on the traditional land of Treaty 6 territory and acknowledge the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Nakota Sioux, as well as Métis and Inuit, and now settlers from around the world. We will start with a roll call of the committee members. Councillor Salvador.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Councillor Paquette.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And Councillor Hamilton has noted that she will be absent. We are joined here today with Councillor Jans.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And I will be just calling out other members of council. Councillor Wright.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Councillor Knack. Councillor Stevenson.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Councillor Tang.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Mayor Sohi. And we have Councillor Salvador here. Councillor Cartmel. Councillor Rice.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And Madam Clerk, did I call anyone else? Is there anyone else? No,
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, great.
Good
Thank
afternoon.
you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Rutherford. I'm so sorry. Would someone please move the adoption of today's agenda?
I'll move the adoption of today's agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Salvador. Please vote on the adoption of the agenda.
We have all the votes.
Please display the votes. And that has carried. Next, we will move to approval of the minutes. Would someone please approve the approval of the minutes from August 23rd, 2022 Urban Planning Committee meeting?
I'll move the approval of the minutes from the August 23rd, 2022 Urban Planning Committee meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Salvador. Please vote on approval of the minutes.
We have all the votes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Please display the votes. And that has carried. Next, we're moving on to protocol items. Are there any protocol items that I have not been given notice of? No? Okay, so next we will select items for debate. Please sign up. Councillor Salvador?
Yeah, I'd like to select 7.1, please.
7.1. Thank you. Anyone else for selection? I'll select 7.2. So since everything has been selected, we now we do not need to vote on items selected, not selected for debate.
Correct. That is correct.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on now. Request to speak. Would someone please move that we hear from the speakers?
I'll move that Urban Planning Committee hear from the following speakers in panels when appropriate. For 7.1, the bike network redeveloping area completion options, Julianna Weber, Edmonton Youth for Climate, who is in person. Juan Vargas from Pass for People, who is in person. Heather Young-Leslie, who is remote. Jacob Komar from the Edmonton Transition and Climate Resilience Committee, remote. Josh Thompson, who's remote. Carly Chen, remote. Evan Lidauer, Protect Our Winters Edmonton Chapter, remote. Jaden Bowden, who is remote. Kelly Granigan from Bike Edmonton, who is in person, Nathan Kluchitzki in person, Jonathan Lawrence from the Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues, remote, Joseph Kerr in person, Daniel Grist from the Edmonton Energy Transition and Climate Resilience Committee Council, remote.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Salvador. Please vote.
We have all the votes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Please display the votes. And that has carried. Next, no requests for specific time on agenda? No. So, councillor inquiries? None that I'm aware of. Reports to be dealt with at a different meeting? None that we are aware of. Request to reschedule reports? No. And unfinished business? None. So next we're off to public reports. So to the speakers, I will just be reading out what will be following here. For each item, administration may provide opening remarks or a presentation. Members of the public who have registered to speak will then be invited to make their presentations. Speakers will be heard in panels, and each speaker will have 5 minutes to present. The clerk will run the official timer in council chamber. The timer lights on the podiums will be green for the first 4 minutes, turn yellow when there is 1 minute remaining, and then flash red when the 5 minutes are up. If you are participating virtually, you may wish to use a timer of your own. When everyone in your panel has had a chance to present, members of council may ask questions of you or other panel members. For this reason, you may wish to remain in the meeting until all questions have been asked of your panel. If you are participating virtually, please remember to mute your microphone when you are not speaking and refrain from using the raise hand function, as it creates issues of fairness and decorum. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please reach out to the Office of the City Clerk using the contact information provided in your confirmation of registration or at city.clerk@edmonton.ca. If you are here with us in person, the clerk will guide you to your seat when it is your turn to speak. As Edmonton transitions from provincial mask mandates and the city temporary mask bylaw, we ask visitors to council chamber to be kind and respectful to each other. You may wear a mask to protect yourself and those around you, and please respect people's personal decisions around wearing masks. In the event of an emergency, please follow the clerk's directions to evacuate. City staff will direct you to your muster point. We will now hear from speakers on this item in a panel. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair.
First, we are hearing from administration. Sorry about that, administration.
No problem at all. We have a short presentation.
Good afternoon. Today we're presenting information to committee on options for implementing the bike plan. The bike plan and the associated implementation guide provide direction to support the development of the active transportation network envisioned in the city plan. Implementation of the active transportation network is one of the actions identified in the Edmonton Community Energy Transition Strategy. This report discusses options for the completion of the bike network in the redeveloping area, along with other actions to accelerate the mode shift envisioned in the city plan. I'm here today with some members of the Planning and Environment Services branch, and I'll ask Nathan Smith, a senior engineer, to provide the highlights of the report.
Thank you, Kent. Next slide, please. Accelerating the implementation of the bike plan will require a shift in approach compared to how administration currently approaches improvements to the bike network. This shift would involve focusing on the completion of the District Connector Network, which is a citywide grid of direct and comfortable connections that support travel within and between districts. Focusing on the District Connector Network would support the development of a continuous network that spans across the redeveloping area. Other changes to the implementation approach would include managing public engagement scope by only completing public engagement for key project locations, a robust proactive communications campaign to help Edmontonians be informed and aware of changes to the network, leveraging use of adaptable infrastructure to rapidly implement changes to the mobility network, and reprioritizing the order that routes are constructed to support rapid implementation timelines. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the implementation options. Each option includes both the capital costs associated with the network infrastructure and the anticipated increase in annual operating costs required for maintenance and supportive programming. Because this work is still at a strategy level, there is still a substantial level of uncertainty in costs, which would be further refined through various stages of planning and design. Option A is the rapid implementation option that would enable the completion of the district connector network within the next budget cycle. Options B through D provide implementation scenarios that incorporate different timelines and priorities. For example, option B spreads out the completion of the district connector network over 8 years instead of 4 years. Option C focuses on routes that are identified as having the highest potential to generate bike trips instead of the entire district connector network. And option D focuses on the completion of the near-term priorities identified in the bike plan implementation guide. Next slide, please. This map shows the district connector network within the redeveloping area, which is generally the area within Anthony Henday Drive. The district connector network is shown in purple, with the solid lines representing existing routes and the dashed lines showing future routes. The near-term priorities, in green, were identified in the bike plan implementation guide. Areas of higher bike trip potential that were identified in the bike plan are shown in the area with the yellow background. Completion of the district connector network is the focus of options A and B. Both of these options would focus on the majority of the purple lines over 4 years for option A and 8 years for option B. Some of the district connector routes are also near-term priorities shown in green, so many of the green routes would also be included in options A and B. Option C is the green lines in the routes in the areas with the yellow-orange background. So this is focusing on the near-term priorities and routes in the areas with higher bike trip potential, in addition to some key district connector routes, so some of the purple lines as well. But it would not prioritize the completion of the entire district connector network. Option D focuses solely on the near-term priorities or the green routes. While this map represents the vision for the long-term network, further planning and engineering will be required to determine details of our route alignments and facility types. Next slide, please. In addition to the network itself, there are other actions the city can take to support Edmontonians looking for active transportation options. This includes work like providing more public bike parking and educational and encouragement programs. The cost to advance these programs is included in the budget estimates provided for each option. Next slide, please. Administration will continue to implement the bike plan where opportunities arise. The majority of this work will continue to occur in alignment with other funded projects when scope and budget allows. If direction is provided from council, administration can present the information required for any of the options presented today to be considered as part of the 2023 to 2026 budget deliberations. Next slide, please. Thank you, and we'd be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And now we will go to the speakers. And I would just like to point out that Mayor Sohi has joined us. Welcome. All right, so number one on the list, Julianna Weber, in person. Is she here? Oh, wonderful. The city clerk will lead you to a chair. Juan Vargas, in person, thank you. Then we have Heather Young Leslie online. Are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Wonderful. Jacob Komar. Are you? Thank you. Josh Thompson, are you there?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Carly Chen, are you there?
Hello.
Hi. Evan Litauer, are you online?
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Jaden Bowden, are you online?
Hi there. Thanks a lot.
Hello. Kelly Granigan, in person. There, hi. Come on up. City clerk will guide you to a chair. Nathan Kluchitzki. Wonderful. Jonathan Lawrence. Are you? Hello,
Yep.
Good afternoon. Do we have one more spot for in person or not? Yeah? Okay, great. Joseph Kerr. And then Daniel Grist, are you online?
He's about to join.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, we are all set. So Julianna Weber, you have 5 minutes. The timer will be counting down. You may wish to follow a timer of your own. So please go ahead.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me today. My name is Julianna Weber and I'm an activist with Edmonton Youth for Climate. With more and more people biking and a climate crisis actively happening, safe, accessible bike lanes are more important than ever. Funding and implementation of bike routes must be top priority to help keep people safe, support equity, and mitigate climate change. For these reasons, implementation options A, C, or a combination of the two are the best options for supporting our city. Biking has always been an important part of my life. In an effort to decrease my carbon footprint, I started biking to school in grade 11. My route, once I got used to it, was mostly stress-free, relaxing even. But for many, not feeling safe deters them from commuting by bike. The number of people biking to work or school is already rising, and with that, so have the number of accidents. According to the Vision Zero annual report in 2021, serious crashes involving cyclists went up 17% in 2021 compared to 2015. Infrastructure needs to catch up with people. I started at the U of A this year, and I would love to ride my bike to my school. My route would go through the river valley, which is a beautiful way to start the day. Unfortunately, I have to ride down 101 Ave to get there, a road that is fairly high traffic and full of potholes. I don't feel safe on that road, especially riding alone. We need to have paths so that people can feel safe. I don't want anyone else to become a statistic, which means we have to act now to make sure that there are safe routes for people already biking and for those who are hesitant to start. Bike lanes are not only a safety solution, but a path to equity, connecting young folks and people with low incomes to where they need to go. When implementing bike lanes, it is essential that funding first and foremost go to communities that are racially diverse and/or low-income areas. People who need access to alternative transport are often those left behind by society. Transportation should not be a barrier for people to live their best lives, but for those without a car, sometimes it can be. We can't wait to put in safe, accessible routes in these areas because people need them now, not just years in the future. Places like the West End that are highlighted for bike routes in the bike plan, but not in the rapid implementation approach, must be included, along with low-income and racially diverse areas. Routes to schools need to be planned. At my high school, Wagner, I was often the only person with a bike parked in the bike rack, and there were more teachers who biked to school than students. There was no safe route for most students to take. These areas must be connected now so that everyone can be part of a just future. Perhaps the most important reason to choose options A, C, or a combination implementation is the climate crisis. We have a limited carbon budget left, and the fact that governments still have not taken action means that the amount of time we have to stay within 1.5 degrees of warming is rapidly declining. People are already feeling the impacts of climate change, especially in the global south. Pakistan, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines are seeing horrible floods. China is experiencing drought, the southern US is experiencing drought, and the prairies are experiencing drought. According to the IPCC, roughly half of the world's population is at risk of facing severe water scarcity at some point during the year. In Edmonton, we are experiencing hotter summers, smoky air, and weird winters. Edmonton has declared a climate emergency, so let's treat it like an emergency. This means rapid decarbonization, and since transportation accounts for 31% of Edmonton's carbon emissions, it is essential to address the ways we move. There is no time to wait. This budget cycle will determine whether or not we meet our climate goals. We know that we need bike infrastructure in place to encourage people to bike, and we need to start building it now. I care about climate change, and therefore I care about bike lanes. I care because there are people right now being forced out of their homes because of climate change. I care because I want winters with great cross-country skiing conditions. I care because my future is at stake. I don't know if you care about climate change and bike lanes because you have children, or because you care about your health, or because your constituents do. But I do know that we can act together to make Edmonton and the world a better place. And part of that is through funding bike lanes now, not later. Bike lanes will make Edmonton more climate resilient, more safe, and more equitable. Choosing to fund and build bike lanes with option A, C, or a combination is the way forward.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Next, we'll go Juan Vargas. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, committee, for hearing from me today. I want to commend you, first of all, on the work you've done in bringing this forward, discussion on the future of the bike network. The choices that you have in front of you today have the opportunity to build a bigger and better city, a city that is vibrant, where neighbors can be friends, and where we affirm that streets are for everyone. I wholeheartedly encourage you to vote for an option A+ to provide both broader connectivity across Edmonton and finer grained connectivity in areas with higher likelihood of bike ridership. The people you're going to hear from today come from across the city to show you that bike infrastructure doesn't just belong downtown, it belongs everywhere. You have an opportunity today to fast-track our bike network, and I want to take you on a journey of what our city can look like 4 years from now if you vote in favor. But first, let me take you back to 4 years ago to understand just how far we've come. In 2018, the downtown bike grid was celebrating 1 year of being completed. Myself, much like many of you and a lot of the people in this room, were seeing the core in a completely new light. In fact, the number of people in this room hardly compares to many people who felt the exact same experience. In 1 year of the bike grid existing, ridership nearly doubled. That was only possible because you and your predecessors chose to take a risk, and 4 years later has transformed our downtown for the better. At the same time, though, the creation of the bike grid exposed glaring inequalities in how cyclists are treated across the city. In many of the areas that some of you represent, like 118th Ave or Stony Plain Road, the rates of fines for cycling on sidewalks were highly disproportionate to those of wealthier neighborhoods. But what options did those cyclists have? If they rode on the sidewalk, they could be ticketed for endangering pedestrians, but if they were on the road, they endangered themselves by being forced onto high-speed traffic that was never designed for a bike. The message sent to those people was really simple: tough luck. The visibility of this disparity taught us two clear lessons. The first one was that, contrary to popular belief, people were biking everywhere, not just downtown. And biking wasn't just something that hipsters and downtown elites did for fun, it was a genuine mode of transportation. The second lesson that we learned was that we couldn't enforce our way out of a problem that only infrastructure could solve. And I can relate to that. I've been warned for biking on the sidewalks. I know a lot of you have been warned for biking on the sidewalks. And I remember at the time, a lot of you said, I wish there was a better option. So here we are today. The options we imagined in 2018 are present for you. What you have before you is not a small decision, and it's maybe one of the most significant decisions you'll make this year when it comes to the future of transportation in the city. So what does that future look like? Let's imagine 2026 together. First, because a significant amount of the development focuses on existing pathways, pedestrians now feel safer with cyclists sharing the space with them. Together, they can have an entire new experience of what Edmonton has to offer. That means thousands more benefiting from outdoor spaces and building the connections that make the city better. Second, ridership across the city will have increased greatly. As our population grows and more people become aware of their climate impacts, all trends point to cycling as a growing main method of transportation. There's also a huge benefit for motorists here, because when more people can genuinely bike across their 15-minute communities, we take more cars off the road. Just like on the other hand, to think about it, bikes aren't going anywhere. If you choose to stay on track as we are now, ridership isn't going to decrease, it's going to continue to increase. So the people who can or must bike are now being given the safe alternatives that they can, as opposed to our status quo. Third, entirely new generations of people and families will have become casual or consistent cyclists because they now see options in their neighborhoods. That doesn't just mean happier people, it means happier communities. And fourth, and definitely the most important, this decision is going to save lives. When we stop forcing people onto traffic and build higher awareness for cyclists and motorists, we can avoid unnecessary friction and protect everyone. As a driver, I can relate to the inconvenience of lost parking spots in some areas, but as a cyclist, I never want to relate to the pain of losing a loved one who could have been saved by something as simple as a protected bike lane. I'm not saying things are going to be perfect. A lot of people are going to struggle to adapt to such a significant change. But we're being given an opportunity to transform what people across all the city really think of cyclists, because now they'll think of cyclists not as a stranger, but as their friends or as their neighbors. I urge you to listen carefully to the many stories you're going to hear today. You'll hear about the ways in which lives have been transformed by access to protected bike lanes. You'll hear about the enormous potential for huge change with a small investment. And you're also going to hear the excitement from people who are ready to squeeze the usability out of every new kilometer that you choose to fund and to add to the bike network. Again, I urge you to choose option A to council or anything that expands the current system. I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, Heather Young-Leslie. You go ahead, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Am I coming through clearly?
Great. Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Thank you, Karen. So my name is Heather Young-Leslie, and I am an academic. And as an academic, I want to speak to the research on bike network development. I'm going to tell you about 2 recent papers only. I'm not giving you a big long reading list, and I'm happy to share these citations if the committee is interested. So in a recent paper titled Growing Bicycle Networks, published in April of 22, so very recently, Shell et al. Synthesized an urban bike network development model, and then they tested it against a reality of 62 cities. Their findings point to the need for city authorities to recognize the need to get to a critical threshold quickly, and to grow the bike networks successfully, cities must invest into them persistently to surpass short-term deficiencies until a critical mass of infrastructure has been built up. And by what they mean by a critical mass of infrastructure, they're talking about connectivity, not just length and or kilometers of bike lanes. In another recent paper that I think the committee should be aware of, published in 2020, called Data-Driven Strategies for Optimal Bicycle Network Growth, researchers Orozco et al. Developed and tested mathematical algorithms to show where and how to consolidate bike network components. They found a very cost-effective way to identify how best to connect fragmented bike lanes into connected networks to improve the efficiency and the sustainability of transportation by bicycle. So here's the gist of the results, is that if a city manager wants more bang for their buck while reducing the carbon footprint, the best way to do that is to improve connectivity of the bicycle routes, which not only improves the ability for people to to move around their city, it also makes for faster and better uptake of the bicycle network itself. So the short term of these, the gist of these only 2 examples, and other research shows the same thing, is that it's possible to rapidly increase ridership and uptake of bicycles as transportation, and that this is most cost effective in the long run if the city invests highly in a short term and develops the network quickly with an emphasis on connectivity. And if you are a car driver, think about the fact that if a new road goes in, everybody takes that road because it's the best route to get to somewhere. New highways are very popular. It's the same principle for bike networks. I would also like to remind the committee, as some of my predecessors have done, if you could cast your minds back to September of 2019. I know many of you were here in the city. It was a very exciting time. Among other things, Greta Thunberg showed up and 10,000 Edmontonians marched on Parliament to express their devotion to the idea that we have to pay attention to climate change. Edmonton produced the Edmonton Declaration, the Change for Climate. Now, despite the last 4 years of provincial gainsaying, we in the city do not have any time to waste in changing behaviors. We need to get more people to feel safe and feel comfortable and to use bicycles as transportation within the city. Now, as a woman of a certain age, someone who currently rides all season because I have access to a safe, easy to use bicycle route between where I live and where I work, but somebody who wants to be able to ride to the symphony for as long as I live, who wants to be able to shop at IKEA by bicycle, who wants to be able to go out for dinner by bicycle, and I want to do that safely and comfortably, and I want to do that in all seasons. I don't have time to wait for 2030 for a network to be introduced and made connected, right? So I am urging the committee to vote for options A and C and to fund those options. This is not an argument against other forms of public transit. I am not doing that. But we need a bike network and we need it to be connected and we need it to be extensive. Now, some of you might know I'm the organizer of the Fancy Women Bike Ride, which last a week and a half ago, September 18th, we had 120 women show up to wear their best clothes and ride their bicycles through the city. And I can tell you that those women noticed that the current options, even though we took bike lanes, are inadequate. We need better infrastructure. Reading administration's options, and I read that report very closely, I fear that the subtext is to spread the cost over
I'm sorry, Ms. Young. Leslie, your time is up. It was lovely hearing from you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Next, Jacob Komar, are you there?
Yep.
Hi, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Mayor. Hello, councillors. My name is Jacob Komar. I'm here on behalf of the Edmonton Transition Climate Resilience Committee, and I'm joined by Daniel Grist, who is their Transportation Subcommittee Chair. I got back into biking about 6 years ago. I forgot how amazing it feels just to ride a bike. It makes you feel like a kid. I bought my wife a bike and tried to bring her along for the journey, but quickly realized that she doesn't feel quite as comfortable on the bike as I do. To even think about going on single track trails. She didn't bike as much as a kid, so going off a curb or down a slight hill with gravel to her feels like competing at the Red Bull Rampage. So I started biking with a friend of mine named Brian. Over the next years, we improved a lot. We went to bike parks together, did some crazy steep Black Diamond Trails jump lines. And I'm only telling you this because I want to explain to you that Brian feels very comfortable on a bike, the exact opposite of my wife. He can do 8-foot drops, gap jumps. He takes calculated risks all the time. He's also fit and is one of those guys that enjoys the fitness aspect. He's one bad decision away from buying Lycra shorts and spandex. But Brian doesn't commute to work on his bike, even though he would love to, and he used to. He moved to Capilano, but now he feels that biking on 50th Street is too dangerous on his bike, and he doesn't feel comfortable. A biker actually died there last month. So how did we get here? Why do we feel so scared and feel unsafe on our own streets? Before cars were invented, streets used to be for people, right? Well, and I guess horses. But over time, cars have taken over our streets completely. Some of this is organic and down to the convenience of cars themselves. Also because the car and fossil fuel industry has been aggressively monopolizing our roadways and undermining public and active transport for over 100 years. As cars became more popular, they started killing a lot of people. The car industry didn't like this negative public outcry, so they're the ones that coined the term jaywalker, which was used as a pejorative, as a way to shame all the people that were inconveniently being killed by their product and blame them for their own death. They successfully lobbied to make crossing the street illegal. They used front companies to buy up public transport like streetcar companies. Then they tore up the train tracks and purposely bankrupted the business to make room for cars. They were using monopolies to push all public and active transport and people off the road so they could sell more cars and we could use more fossil fuels. They then lobbied to make sure highways and mass roads got built through every corner of our cities using taxpayer money. So after World War II, while Europe and Asia invested heavily in public transport, in North America, we invested in roads. That is why our cities look like they do. And while in Europe and Asia, you can use public transport to get everywhere, here our only option is to drive. And that's why my friend Brian doesn't feel safe biking. We didn't build cities for people, we built them for cars. We're literally living in the General Motors 1950s vision of what a perfect car-centric city will look like. So we come to a crossroads. Today is the day we can start investing in the city that we want to live in. The accelerated bike plan will make our cities more walkable, bikeable, livable, less noisy, less polluted, more healthy, more sustainable, more connected, and more equitable. This bike plan is foundational to everything in our energy transition plan, our densification efforts, our 50% modal shift, 15-minute communities plan, the city plan. We cannot delay this work and we have to accelerate as fast as possible. Let us remember as well that access to transportation is the single greatest factor in an individual escaping poverty. The great news, is that for the dollars invested, we can make a profound impact to what it's like to live in Edmonton. This can truly be transformational. In 1 year, by enacting a bold bike plan, Paris increased their bike ridership by 54% in just 1 year. It is time for us to be bold as well. And bike lanes do make a huge difference. While my friend Brian doesn't feel comfortable biking to work, my wife is now biking to her classes at the U of A, 25 minutes each way at night with lights on her bike. How did that happen? Someone that is not comfortable on a bike feels totally comfortable biking at night that far and actually loving the experience? The answer is bike lanes. From our house, my wife takes Mill Creek Ravine to the bike lane on 83rd Ave and takes that all the way to the U of A. She feels safe, protected, and even the traffic lights sense her approach and change for her. It's not perfect yet, but if we make Edmontonians feel safe, they will retake the streets on foot and bikes. That will reduce our emissions, that will improve health, and that will reduce pollution in our city. So we enthusiastically support the acceleration of the bike plan, and we recommend implementation of option C or something even more ambitious and bold. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Josh Thompson. Are you there?
I am.
Hi. Okay, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, councillors. My name is Josh, and I'm a resident of West Jasper Place in Ward Nakota Iska, and I'm also the vice president of the West Jasper Sherwood Community League. I'm thankful for each of your service to our city, and I'm really grateful today to have a few moments to share with you ways that we can improve our bike and mobility infrastructure in our city. My story starts as someone who now bikes a lot. It started 1.5 years ago. My wife and I, we bought a home in a mature community so that we could stay central to many of our needs and reduce our car dependency. We'd moved back from a few years in the Greater Toronto area where we experienced the daily burden of a car-dependent and congested city. We bought bikes, we moved back so that we could commute to work in the core, so that we could see friends, we could get groceries, we could visit shops, and also so that we could access festivals and events without the fear of parking. Interestingly enough, in 18 months of being regular bikers, we have seen more of the city, supported more local events, shopped at more main streets, and fallen more in love with our city than the 18 years living in car-dependent suburbs in the Southwest, where biking for transportation and human scale design is very hard to find. I biked throughout last winter for the first time and have a dozen other friends who've now joined the bike commuting fun. Many of them have sold one of their 2 family vehicles to get e-bikes or other kinds of bikes, and we all live in the West End, not in the most central parts of our city or in the urban parts of our city. I share this personal anecdote to say that I've seen firsthand, both for myself and through countless friends, how biking isn't just great for us as individuals, but it's great for our city, for local businesses, for local festivals, and for many of us who still do need to drive and park occasionally. Biking infrastructure is a true win-win for both individuals and our city. And there's 2 key ideas I want to share today that I hope will encourage you to support.
Sorry, Mr. Thompson, you went muted. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Yes, go ahead.
Perfect. Sorry about that. So there's 2 key ideas I want to share that I hope will encourage you to support an accelerated implementation of the bike plan. The first is that we need to accelerate our bike plan because there are vast areas of missing links that our neighborhood renewals, solo road projects will not adequately fix in the next decade without a comprehensive, focused build out of bike lanes, such as option A, or as Paths for People is calling it, an A+ option. Councillor Tim Cartmell said in a post-media talkback show, to create better bike lanes, we need to search for the missing links, those spots where a targeted investment would suddenly open larger parts of the city to cycling, rollerblading, walking, and jogging. I agree with Tim on this point. The West Central District, where I live, I think is a bike infrastructure desert, but has high potential for ridership. This is a missed opportunity with dozens of schools, including many of our city's largest high schools, that could be much better served with the implementation of this plan. West Central has huge potential. We are 15 to 20 minutes to bike downtown. We are just 10 minutes to West Edmonton Mall, our second largest employment hub in the city. We are 20 to 30 minutes to the University of Alberta. And each of those areas I mentioned, downtown, West Ed, and the U of A, have serious restrictions on parking, accessibility by vehicles. And so opening up alternatives is key. The entire West Central area, like many areas of our city, is a missing link. And district connectors are an essential part for every part of our city to at least begin to offer somewhere safe to bike. So my first idea is that we need to fill in these missing links very quickly. The second idea is that by approving hundreds of millions to spend on bike lanes, even though that might seem like a crazy idea or a big deal in Edmonton, this is actually just the status quo for cities globally. Not doing this is actually the irresponsible and uneconomic choice. For a few examples, Paris is adding 180 kilometers of bike lanes by 2026. Milan is spending 400 million euros to add 750 kilometers of bike paths. Bogota is adding another 120 kilometers of bike lanes and upgrading 100 kilometers of existing painted lanes. Abu Dhabi is adding 109 kilometers of a segregated cycleway. Montreal just approved 36 more kilometers to add to their already existing 400 kilometers of bike network. And Montreal is a city just as cold and with double the amount of snow of Edmonton. Oslo in Norway in 2018 shifted from 1.5 kilometers a year to 15 kilometers a year of bike lane building. And if you're following the mayor's race in Ottawa right now, you know that bike lanes is a massive part of most of the front runners platforms. So all this to say, by Edmonton aggressively building hundreds of kilometers of bike lanes the next decade, we aren't doing anything out of the norm, but rather we're just keeping pace with the global marketplace for attracting and retaining talent in our city and improving the quality of life for our communities. So councillors, I hope that you will support an implementation of the bike plan in an accelerated way and a combination of both options A and C. We all benefit from it, whether we ride daily or never ride. Our kids, our grandparents, those with mobility challenges, and those struggling to afford the enormous financial burden of cars all over the city deserve choice. Let's provide it.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Carly Chen. Go ahead, you have 5 minutes.
Hello, my name is Carly Chen. I live in Ward O'Damon in one of the near-term priority areas. And I use my bike as my primary means of transportation whenever possible. And so does my 8-year-old son. So I'm asking that council approve option A and option C. I'm not quite sure why they're presented as mutually exclusive options. We live quite close to some fairly nice protected district connector lanes, but at the moment there's not really a safe way to get to any of them. So having the neighborhood connections are very important, but the district connector would allow us to see much more of the city. So I would also say that I would ask council to ensure that when we're connecting missing links, we are actually connecting, creating connected bike infrastructure, because currently a lot of the district connector network that is shown on the map does not actually have any protected or any infrastructure for bikes at all. They are shared lanes, and several of them are shared lanes on high traffic roads, which are not an all ages mobility solution. So I think that both the district connector and the local high priority networks are very important, but it's also important that we ensure that all of that network that's on paper is actually able to be used by everyone. So as an example, my son and I were biking to his school last year, and on paper, the entire thing, except for a few blocks, is a district connector bike route. But actually less than half of that is separated from cars. More than half is a shared road. And the Edmonton's design standards for a safe shared road are that it be 30 kilometers per hour or less and 1,000 vehicles per day or less. Almost none of the shared roads, possibly none, meet those standards. The one that's leading to his school is 40 kilometers per hour and well over the traffic limits. But it also leads directly past four elementary schools and within one block of another. So if there were a way for children to use that route, if it was the safe route that it looks like on paper, very many of them could get themselves to school. So it would decrease traffic in the area. It would save the parents a lot of time, and it would also give children more independence to live in their city. So please build it, but the quality of what you build matters. And as far as who uses it, I know that women and children particularly, but also women, are grossly underrepresented in active transport. So when Calgary was trying out their protected network a few years ago, 5 years ago, I think, they found that adding in physical protection from cars increased mode share for women from 22% to 30%. And the number of children riding also increased by tenfold from 0.1 to 1 point something percent. So that is about all I have to say. Please build both A and C and ensure that what you're connecting is actually protected from cars all the way.
Thank you very much. Next, we will hear from Evan Litauer.
Hello, am I coming through clearly?
Hi, you sure are. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Great. Hello, all. My name is Evan Litauer, and I'm speaking on behalf of Protect Our Winters Edmonton. We are a diverse group of outdoor enthusiasts who want to utilize our passion for the outdoor spaces and turn that passion into direct climate action. Advocating for investments in sustainable transportation is a key policy pillar for our organization. I'm here today to voice our support of the implementation of option A, completing the district connection network by 2026. Investing in the bike infrastructure allows for individuals to safely access larger segments of the city. As an individual living in Allendale, having direct access to safe bike infrastructure has increased the amount that I have been able to use my bicycle for commuting and errand purposes significantly. I cannot say that my peers who live in parts of the city that lack similar infrastructure carry the same sentiment towards traveling via bicycle, with the largest concern being their own personal safety. Having a larger bicycle path network is a direct investment into the safety of Edmontonians who want the freedom and accessibility to travel between communities without using a vehicle. Through investments in alternative transportation options, Edmonton creates an opportunity to reduce our reliance on vehicles and helps our city move towards a zero carbon future. Transportation is one of the largest sources of carbon pollution in Canada. If the appropriate cycling environment allowed an individual to ride their bicycle instead of driving just once a day, their personal emissions would drop by 67%. To achieve this increase in ridership, safe cycling infrastructure needs to be developed, as it is one of the most important factors with increasing the amount of cyclists within a city. A 2021 study compared cities before and after bike-centric urban development programs, finding that ridership increased 48% on average after the implementation of safe cycling infrastructure. This increased ridership can capture much more than people commuting to work. These people can be families utilizing the space to teach their kids how to ride a bicycle in a safe environment, retired individuals who want to explore and interact with their communities in a more meaningful way, and children whose parents are letting them learn how to take on small amounts of responsibility by cycling to school instead of being dropped off in a car. The City of Edmonton put out a call to actions for its citizens to work together to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 35% by the year 2035. Achieving a goal such as this requires strong leadership on initiatives that create the opportunity for Edmontonians to have a personal impact and contribute to completing this goal. This notion of leadership from City Council has happened in other cities across Canada, with Vancouver and cycling, Ottawa and public transit, and Montreal with sustainable mobility. It's time for Edmonton to follow the evidence and create a healthier, more accessible city. This concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll move to Jaden Bowden. Are you there?
Yes, hello.
Hi, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Excellent. So first of all, thank you for having me, letting me speak. It's great to see all the different backgrounds and the different locations people come from and different aspects there. I just want to start by saying that I think it's amazing that what the city has done for cycling over the past 5 years. I only moved here in 2017, but each year I notice a big improvement. So I think we have a lot of good trajectory and we just want to keep going with that. So I live downtown and I travel to all parts of the city as a musician and also to make photos and videos. So it's interesting to see the different pockets of the city that have been more or less developed. I'd like to touch on some projects I'm just working on that kind of inform where I'm coming from in some of my points. I recently finished a video project in the EU looking at urban mobility in 5 different cities, excuse me, 6. And that's walking, cycling, and transit. In addition to that, starting tomorrow, I'm filming and presenting at a masterclass in Amsterdam, where I am now, and that's called Designing the Cycling City. So it's been really interesting to look at some of these cities and see what works and what doesn't. Because I think if we're going to make cycle paths, it's not enough to just put paint on a street, and we know sharrows don't work, but we need high quality ones. And so as Paths for People has mentioned, kind of going for option A, but I'd like to say, you know, A isn't good enough. We need AAA, all ages and abilities. And this includes things like wide bike paths. One thing I've noticed is some of the cities that have the most success with these programs don't just have a bike path on each side of the road, but they have a double wide path, because one of the nice things about driving in your car is that you can have somebody in the passenger seat and have a nice conversation. And if that's taken away, then you miss out on a lot of the social benefits of cycling. And another individual mentioned group rides and needing more infrastructure for those. So I think that's a really important part and can do a lot to kind of getting more people into that cycling environment. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes, seeing where I'm at. Another thing that's really important to create a safe cycling network, especially, is some of the crossings. So especially like this was done in my neighborhood in Central McDougall, where a lot of the curbs were shortened to make it easier and safer to cross. I think this should be expanded throughout the city, because it's really no fun cycling or walking along 6 lanes of traffic and having to do that. I cycled up 97th Street from downtown for the past 5 years for work, and it is not very pleasant. So finding opportunities to close those gaps can do a lot for especially making it feel safer for children, seniors, people with mobility impairments, etc. In addition to that, one of the things I find most dangerous when cycling is slip lanes. So if there are cycle lanes going in, it's important to take away the slip lanes. There's a great cycle path that was implemented on 97th Street. Unfortunately, it crosses a multitude of slip lanes, and I've almost been taken out, even though I have the right of way and I'm paying attention. Luckily I am, they weren't. So I think those are something that, kind of talking about, if we're going to make infrastructure, it needs to be really high quality. So making sure that there's a plan for that. One of the solutions I've seen for that, for example, in the Netherlands, it's also very common in the UK, is that the crossings are set back. So as opposed to crossing kind of right at the edge near the road, you go back maybe 2 meters, and that way there's better sight lines and all that kind of stuff. With no slip lanes, you don't get the acceleration factor for motor vehicles as well. And you also eliminate those unpleasant little pork chop islands. I'll just wrap up, give a few examples. The 101 Avenue section on the east side of the city, I think, is a great example where in some of the redesign proposals, there's actually more slip lanes, like at Wayne Gretzky intersection. So I think that's something to seriously consider when we look at making this route a big corridor. My girlfriend, she works over on 50th Street. She would love to bike, but that corridor is no good, and she doesn't feel safe on it, as somebody else mentioned. In addition, I don't think that the costs are very a huge barrier. I'm fine with the tax raise. I know that's not a popular thing across the city, but when you look at some of the cost overruns, for example, $50 million, I believe, on the 50th Street overpass as just the overrun portion, I feel like
I'm sorry, Mr. Boydwine, sorry. Your time is up. Sorry to cut you off there.
That is okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. Let's go for A+.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, Kelly Granigan. Hi, you have 5 minutes.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get my notes loaded up. Hi, I'm Kelly Granigan, a new board member at Bike Edmonton. Bike Edmonton supports Paths for People's position of supporting option A+, in that we strongly support option A, building out all the district connector routes and some neighborhood routes in areas with high bike trip potential, like south of Southgate or north of downtown. On a personal note, the existing bike infrastructure has changed the lives of my family. We are a family of 4, including 2 school-aged children. We all winter bike. We used to live in Mill Woods. I started biking to work when we lived there because of the shared use path along 50th Street. I felt safe. I wouldn't have started if I didn't feel safe. We moved into a central neighborhood and went car-free because we wanted to bike even more. It would be great if people, even in the suburbs, had access to safe, connected infrastructure so they could stay in their communities, contributing to the neighborhood, supporting local businesses there. Because we bike, we feel more connected to our community and our neighbors. We see and talk to people in our community more often. We save a ton of money, and we're healthier and happier. We are fortunate to have the option of living anywhere in Canada, and one of the major selling points for my family is the bike network in Edmonton. I want more people across all of Edmonton to have access to safe, connected bike routes as soon as possible, especially with inflation and climate change top of mind. Council's city plan and energy transition strategy call for the completion of the district connector routes specified in option A. Gaps in the network left by other options can be a major barrier, especially to new cyclists. Only option A gives better transportation options for the long-neglected Northeast and West End in particular. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Nathan Kluchitzki. Hi, Nathan, go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Hi, thank you. My name is Nathan Kluchitzki. I'm supporting the accelerated bike plan. Strongly support option A. At the start of my being in high school, my main mode of transportation was a bike. My parents worked early mornings. I couldn't afford a car. And I was kind of sick of waiting on public transportation that would leave me 30 minutes late to school if the bus came early, and I would just be stuck waiting for the next one. It was my way of pursuing independence. I would carry my bike up the old wooden stairs near the Hotel McDonald, out of breath and sweaty, but I didn't care because I got to school myself and on time. If I ran 2 minutes late, missed my bus, I wouldn't end up 30 minutes late, but instead 2 minutes late or maybe just on time and a little sweaty. I didn't have to constantly worry if my bus was going to be late or if I was going to miss my transfer. I love not having to rely on this uncontrollable element and having to explain to my teachers why I was late almost every day. I was in good shape, my first block teachers liked me a little more, and I loved that freedom. What I didn't love was dealing with cars. My mom was always fearful of me cycling to school, not because she didn't trust that I was a good cyclist, but because she knew how much commuters hate cyclists. I must have seen too many coexist bumper stickers and be given some false hope, but while following all the rules of the road, I've been screamed at from cars flying way too close beside me, so close we end up sharing the same lane, or of them falling what feels like 1 centimeter behind me. I've had trucks blast their horns just to get a scare, or the worst, which is rolling coal, where a modified truck blasts smoke out of their exhaust while driving in front of you. These events are scary, and they pushed me away from cycling, and this doesn't even include being hit twice and the countless other close calls. Knowing I was truly hated and that drivers were willing to put me in extremely dangerous situations in an already extremely dangerous activity, biking on a road with cars, got me to stop cycling to school completely. I lost that element of my freedom, and I just thought that, yeah, cars are right. Commuting is only for riding a bike is only for little kids on sidewalk. So I was back on the bus because, again, I still couldn't afford a car, and my parents still had to go to work. It wasn't until university where I was able to take advantage of the protected bike lane going down 83rd Avenue. Being completely separated from these cars gave me the confidence to start commuting again. I biked through winter because if I slipped, I knew that I wasn't going to get run over by a lifted truck who could barely see me in the first place. It was one of the best parts of my university experience. I loved the freedom, being outside, all of the above there. And then since graduating, I started working as a substitute teacher with EPSB. Being a junior high substitute teacher, I have some really awesome days and some maybe less than ideal ones, but I know no matter how tough a day is, the worst part will always be my commute. I can't afford a car, so my choices are either I take a bus or I cycle. I bought my fair share of Uber rides as a result of missed transfers in the morning, or from buses flying past because they cannot fit another soul on, they're so crammed. I don't have any other options when I learn the placement this same morning, and I simply cannot be late. As a result, cycling is the only thing I can afford, and it's the only other alternative. I wake up hoping I won't have to risk my life getting to the new school today, but it's starting to get really sad when every morning my heart inevitably drops as I have to leave my protected bike lane and share a road with cars whipping past, and knowing some of them are going to go out of their way to make my commute more dangerous when it's already dangerous enough. It's no surprise when I see empty bike racks at every school I go to. When I ask students if anyone would bike to school, even if the weather was perfect, they all say no, because they are convinced, and sadly correct, that they greatly risk getting hit and killed on the busy road they will inevitably have to cross with cars whipping past them. And it's also no surprise when 3 to 7 students come in 10 to 30 minutes late every first block class because their bus was late or simply didn't show up. What other option do they have? Just like when I was their age, they can't afford a car, their parents work, and it's too dangerous for them to cycle. There's no choice for them to choose. Unless option A is voted for, students and frankly anyone who can't afford a car, myself included, will continually have one form of reliable transportation that is safe. Unless option A is voted for, if someone just tries to go a little extra freedom by cycling, it's almost guaranteed at one point they'll have a near-death experience outside of a bike lane at least once. In the words of the comedian Norm Macdonald, I don't drive because it's scary. You're going 70, someone comes up going 70, everyone's honking, it's scary. I agree with Norm. And unless option A is voted for, every cyclist in this city will continue to be put in that position, but also on a bike and also around people who hate them. Living in the city, it's hard enough not having a car. There's just points where I look at Google Maps, it's a 10-minute drive, an hour and a half minute bus ride, and an hour bike through lanes with no protection. So please help those who can't afford a car have a little easier time in Edmonton.
Thank you for that. Next, we'll hear from Jonathan Lawrence. Are you there? Yep, I see you there. Hi, we can hear you. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. My computer is glitching here. Just give me half a second. Sorry, I'm completely glitched out. All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Madam Clerk, councillors, and Mayor Sohi. My name is Jonathan Lawrence, and I speak to you as the planning advisor on behalf of the FCL. I also want to recognize the really immense and ongoing work of community leagues and all of the folks here today who have made a really incredible contribution to the conversation. As the FCL, we really wish to extend our strong support for the completion of the bike network in the redeveloping area by 2026. Specifically, we recommend that this report is received for information and that a subsequent motion is made to explore implementation of an option C+, which invests in expanding neighborhood routes in areas of high bike trip potential, that's option C, as well as strategic implementation of priority routes within the district connector network, illustrated as option A. We believe that this approach strikes the right balance, ensuring that investment is effective in catalyzing immediate mode shift in line with city plan targets, and equitable in creating targeted investment citywide. We believe that the bike plan provides an excellent roadmap and a comprehensive vision for creating a safe mobility system, which supports a healthy city, livable urban places, climate resilience, and a prosperous regional economy. We believe that the bike plan reflects well the real experience of residents and local businesses and neighborhoods, which are well served by high quality active transportation infrastructure. We see that when our public spaces are accessible and inclusive, when we make it easy or safe to walk, bike, and roll through the city, we have fewer serious injuries and deaths. Our local businesses become well supported. Vibrancy seems to return to main streets. We're more likely to stop, linger, and chat with our neighbors. parents feel more comfortable allowing their children to play in front yards, on sidewalks, and ride to school or local parks. In short, our public spaces, which is really what our streets are, become inhabitable. They become cared for and develop a rhythm which is attuned to people, not just cars. We believe that while this people-centric urban design, which imagines vibrant, convenient, and connected neighborhoods and districts, provides a robust rationale for support, what is in front of you today is also an opportunity to take immediate and concrete action on climate. It's an opportunity to make progress towards a commitment to 50% reduction of vehicle emissions locally by 2050, and to support global targets as we consider the life cycle emissions of private vehicles, whether they're gas or electric. We believe the investment in climate action is critical to achieving our energy transition strategy and decarbonization goals. As well, it's an opportunity to act in step with global C40 cities, act on the UNFCCC Paris Agreement, and demonstrate that you're listening to more than 70% of Edmontonians who have expressed that we should be doing more to help prevent climate change. Importantly, we believe that this is a core investment, as you've heard elsewhere today, i.e. this is an enabling investment and one which will allow us as a city to accommodate the growth, intensification, and land use changes which are contemplated in the city plan and other cascading plans and policy. Leagues have been clear with us that it's untenable to accommodate 50% of new housing units through infill if each of those units is served primarily by one or more personal vehicles. We understand that not all Edmontonians can or will immediately choose alternative mobility options. However, providing meaningful alternatives in the short term allows us to have more effective conversations about things like district plans, the new zoning bylaw, mass transit implementation, curbside management strategy, and other policy documents which are beginning to imagine Edmonton differently than has been done in the past. We believe that rapid implementation of the bike plan also offers a really unique opportunity for engagement. This is to allow administration to work decisively to bring the bike plan to life, while also providing an opportunity for leagues and residents to engage as context experts, sharing their experiences, observations, and suggestions to refine the network as it's tested and solidified. Josh Thompson today, speaking on behalf of the West End, is a great example of that. Proposed implementation with less complex locations and with adaptable infrastructure provides an opportunity for administration to experiment with more iterative and ongoing engagement, to develop systems in which they can listen and learn from users in real time, and ultimately co-create a mobility system that's in line with our aspirations for a 15-minute city. So we strongly recommend that this committee and council move decisively on this matter. Further, if done right, we believe that immediate and substantive investment in climate action, as well as other big city moves that this supports, is not at odds with principles of participation. So we look forward to working with you to creatively engage citizens in the transformation of their neighborhoods. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Joseph Kerr. Go ahead, you have 5 minutes.
Hello, and thank you for having us here today, and thank you for everyone speaking. There's a lot of good reasons why option A, any kind of implementation should go ahead. We all know those reasons. So my background's engineering, so I'm going to tell you just build it, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay, and I look at numbers as an engineer, all right? So I dug in the budget. Let's look at the capital plan for 2019-2022. $1.2 billion for roads. That's like $300 per person per year for roads, whether you own a car or not. Bikes over the same time, $56 a person per year. So you could either say we could do a lot more, or what great value. You can get everyone you need using bike infrastructure, you know, for a sixth, like a fraction of the cost. And then we spend $66 million over the same 3 years rejuvenating alleys for cars. So one third what would bike infrastructure cost to implement. And that's an investment, that's not an ongoing cost, just for alleys. You know, and I dug into the operational costs too, and, you know, looking at LRT and road maintenance is a bit opaque, but, you know, this sum, $11 million a year for bikes, works out for one person, what is it, 3 cents per person per day. 3 cents to have a maintained bike network. Awesome deal. All right, and you want to go 50-50, so all you have to do is balance those numbers, and assuming there's more bang for your buck, maybe you don't even have to do 50-50, you could just find some sort of blend that works. So you say, okay, that still costs money, it's got to come from somewhere. Okay, provincial budget. The Carbon Capture Innovation Fund has a nearly $700 million surplus over the next 3 years, which is the plan for this. So you could spend the money here, spend the money in Calgary, and still have tons of money left over to do other emissions reductions work, okay? That still leave $305 million, or no, sorry, there's $305 million just for carbon capture, okay? And then I looked at what we spend on roads as a province. So again, people in Edmonton subsidize this, $255 per person per year. So as an Edmonton citizen, per person, $550 a year for your roads. So my family, over $2,000. So, and I'm trying to justify to my kids why we didn't do it, and it's a no-brainer. So I say I'm really happy that we have what we have, but it's like we just need to build it. Option A, option C, there's money there. It's a good deal, and everyone else has provided so many great reasons why, the subjective benefits and health benefits. Here's another number. It took me 40 minutes to bike here. It would have taken me 30 minutes to drive and find parking. So I got 40 minutes of exercise for only 10 minutes extra, really, if you think about it, because I would have spent a half hour in my car, but now I get 40 minutes of exercise for free for 10 minutes, basically. So every day I'm getting those benefits. And our family still has a car. Maybe someday we'll get rid of that car, but I'd like for all the citizens, and my kids in particular, to say, we made this city better, safer, and we just looked at the numbers, and that's it. So there's lots of great reasons, and I'm so glad everyone here shared their experiences, because I too have had the subjective benefit of cycling. I talked to the mayor. I have a folding bike. It's a bit unique, but I chatted with him in the front before the meeting. Would I have had that conversation had that bike, I hadn't biked or I'd driven? No, he would have just walked by. I mean, there's tons of other benefits that building this is going to make the city way better. I've been here a year, and I'm here now, and through biking, I've met lots of people. So thank you. Please consider it. Consider the money well spent. Find it. I know there's people like myself willing to, as other people have mentioned, the tax increase or find funding elsewhere for it, because there is money. We have it. It's just what our priorities are. So thank you.
Thank you. Daniel Grist, are you there now?
I am indeed. Can you hear and see me?
We can hear you. Go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Awesome, thank you. So hello, Mayor Sohi and councillors. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Energy Transition Climate Resilience Committee. You heard from our chair, Jacob, earlier, and I think he summed up the argument and the emotions from our perspective perfectly. But I'm going to add to that a little bit. We're speaking in favor of accelerating the bike network implementation. So as a city, we're in a period of extraordinary change. Several initiatives are redesigning the city and the way in which we get around. These include densification, 15-minute communities, zoning changes, increased transit infrastructure, increased walking and cycling infrastructure, and many more. All of this will require careful planning, but also they'll organically grow over time. So as we embark on a decades-long redesign of Edmonton, it's important we implement the bike network, something that's foundational to a lot of our plans, as soon as possible. This way we can incorporate our learnings into other city initiatives at the earliest feasible date. Aside from ensuring efficiency and harmony whilst implementing our various initiatives, the accelerated implementation of our bike network will ensure Edmontonians see the benefits of such a network earlier. This includes benefits to mental and physical health, more widespread access to a lower cost form of transport, and of course the reduction of emissions from any commuter journeys replaced. Regarding which pathway to take, and we're only comparing A, B, C, and D, we could be swayed to C plus A, as other people have talked about here. It sounds like a great option. But regarding the 4 pathways, we would like to recommend pathway C, building priority district connector routes and neighborhood routes in the densest central city areas will increase the likelihood of replacing commuter car journeys with bike trips and increase the chances of reducing car ownership. Thus, this will maximize our emissions reduction potential as compared to options A, B, and D. That wraps up our perspective. So thank you for listening, but we will be, myself and Jacob will be around for questions afterwards. So thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Madam Clerk, I believe that is it for our speaker list.
That is correct.
Okay, great. So next we will move to questions to the speakers. Are there any questions for speakers? Councillor Salvador?
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you so much to all the speakers who came out today. Really fantastic perspectives and really comprehensive presentations too from a variety of perspectives. So much appreciation there. I'm going to start just on one thing that I picked up with Julianna. You mentioned places like the West End that are highlighted in the bike plan, but not necessarily in the current report as high potential areas. Can you just elaborate on that? I think I picked up on the same thing, but I want to make sure.
So I did, there was a person in this who I was communicating with, and he had pointed it out to me. So basically it's like in the district plan that was shown today, there's like a spot on the West End that isn't an orange, yellow circle, but in the bike plan, they have a similar picture and there is a yellow circle there, and it's not. So it was I'm pretty sure that's the high potential trip area, and it wasn't in the second picture.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that clarity, and I'll ask city admin about that as well, because I had a similar question. Yeah, also, Juan, you picked up on something that has been on my mind for quite a while, and it comes back to equity and the distribution of our bike infrastructure. You talked a little bit about where we see higher proportions of tickets for riding on the sidewalk. And I know that's a concern along 118th Avenue in particular. When it comes to the options that are in front of us, I know you mentioned option A or anything that expands that current system. Do you have a sense of sort of an A or C, which one would provide that type of coverage? Or would you also be looking for both? And maybe elaborate a little bit on what the A+ option is that Pass for People is putting forward.
Yeah, thank you. So the A+ option looks at primarily that district connector with an addition of looking at what those high trip areas look like and focusing on those first, right? Kind of looks at the kind of getting the nice to have out of the way and focusing first on the need to have. But I think a lot of the conversation here today shows that people are interested in both A and C. Some people are interested in both. I think if you find that you can vote for both, then I would say a combination of both, and expanding what's being recommended to you would be the best option. A+, I think, really encapsulates that as well.
Yeah, and I think we've heard from speakers, we're hearing a lot of positive things about A, but also C, and that's where I'll focus a lot of my further questions, and I'll direct it to Heather Young-Leslie. Are you still with us?
Yes, Ashley, I am here.
Okay, excellent. I really appreciated that you brought some of the academic perspective and research-based perspective. Again, trying to look at option A and C. I have questions about connectivity, the density of the network. So in the research that you have looked at and analyzed, option C in my mind is kind of capitalizing on existing areas where we already have higher density of routes and network and sort of building on those existing strengths, whereas option A is a more distributed citywide model. When it comes to increasing ridership and getting folks to be able to switch modes, can you speak to the difference between those two options?
So the point I was trying to make is that you need both of those options. You definitely need connectivity. So what is available in option C? You need people to be able to get from A to B in the shortest, most convenient kind of route. But you need ideal places to be connected. And so people need to be able to get across their city. So it's not just looking at one specific district, because people don't necessarily work in the place where they live, right? And so we have noticed that, and certainly that's been flagged by you and many other people, is that the missing links are very important, but the missing links include the ability to get across the city. So to be able to get from the northeast or northwest to the southwest or southeast is important. And so we need both of those things together.
Okay, so again, you'd come back to A plus C.
I would, yes.
Okay, and then just to Jonathan Lawrence from EFCL, you mentioned that when it comes to accelerating our implementation, moving quickly is not necessarily at odds with citizen participation and engagement, and that there might be some really interesting opportunities when it comes to things like adaptable infrastructure and seeing leagues and community members as local experts. I'm trying to envision what that could look like as hopefully as this rolls out over the next few years.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I want to give a lot of credit to administration for kind of being able to do that and experiment with us. And I know they're willing to partner in figuring that out. But I think really when we look at some of this temporary infrastructure, and I hear speakers, and I definitely understand the kind of interest in going in hard and putting in really great infrastructure. I would echo that sentiment. But I think in the short term, we are going to have great protected infrastructure that is done easily and quickly with temporary styled bike lanes like you see on 100th Avenue, for example. So I think as we do that, we can roll out a bit of an engagement strategy that takes advantage of the strength of that medium itself, in that we can talk to
I'm sorry to cut you off, Mr. Lawrence, but we're over time, so maybe we'll come back for a second round. Sorry about that. Councillor Paquette?
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Councillor Principe. Actually, Jonathan, that was similar to a question I was going to ask, so if you want to continue, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Paquette. No, and I'll maybe keep it short. That kind of infrastructure allows us to really talk to communities, whether it's the leagues or other communities within our neighborhoods, about how they're experiencing the bike lanes as they've been designed within the bike plan, so that we can make small tweaks, changes, new entrances, connections, identify missing links. And I think that that's really what gets to the heart of engagement, is the ability to co-create the end product, not necessarily have a massive oversight of the initial implementation.
Yeah, okay. You know, I find it kind of interesting. I can think of two recent overpasses that are going ahead without very much debate, vehicle overpasses, like maybe no debate, really. And the total of those two overpasses combined is the total of the full build out that we could contemplate here. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, you know, some people might say, oh, well, the cost or the maintenance, the operational costs, is that really any different than road costs and maintenance? And like, I mean, I think that you've given some thought to this. I'm just thinking about what people might say in objection, and you know, they'll look at the price tag and only the price tag, and not be able to actually compare it or contrast it with the price tag we put on road architecture, when really these things should be viewed as the same thing. They shouldn't be at, I don't think they're at odds. I think that they are they're just modes of transportation. So your thoughts?
Yeah, and I'm sure there's others on this call who could more effectively speak to that. But
and if anyone can, please jump in right after Jonathan's finished.
Yeah, no. But I would say every league is as different as the other. So there is no one homogenous league interpretation to that question. I do, however, really respect the ability of leagues to understand the numbers, to look at it logically in the way that you are. And I understand as well, to the point of a few different people, that we're talking about a real fraction of what we're spending on road-based infrastructure. So if you're taking an approach which looks at our kind of capital costs as a whole, I don't know, for what it's worth from me, I think that it makes a lot of sense to invest in this way.
Yeah, a full build out that keeps cyclists, pedestrians, and drivers safe. I know that Councillor Principe had a near miss with a cyclist once, and this would cut down on that. But I know that as a cyclist, I mean, I'm not even a cyclist. I've ridden my bike to work a few times, and every time I felt kind of, frankly, I was taking my life in my hands. So yeah, if anyone else has something to add to that, that would be great. No? Okay. All right. So my next question then is, I think you were mentioning about the ability for people to just have a one-car household instead of a two-car household. And I'm just wondering if you've given any thought, or the EFCL has given any thought to the savings that we can expect to accrue then if we have less cars on the road, providing wear and tear on our road infrastructure. And if that, I mean, I think conceptually I'd have to crunch the numbers, but I think that it probably doesn't just even itself out. I think that you come out ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I mean, everybody here likely knows that we're heading into a difficult budget discussion in the coming months, and part of that is the way that we've built the city. We've kind of spread ourselves quite thin, to use your analogy. We've spread the butter thin, if I remember correctly. And that is really part of the challenge that we face here. We look at kind of the speed, the weight, the impact on a year-to-year basis of cycling over driving, and there's really no comparison. So when I look at the kind of broader strokes of that question, I think, yes, it makes sense from the city's perspective. But I also really don't want to miss the maybe bigger thing of the choice to have mobility that is safe, but is also affordable. I forget the speaker's name, but they made really great points around not everybody can afford a car, and to live in a city where that is the only choice, which is safe and effective, presents, I think, an equity problem that we need to deal with here today.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. And I just wanted to clarify that near miss was I was walking, not driving. Okay. And next, Councillor Jans.
Thank you for this. So I was interested in hearing from Jacob and Daniel a bit about the e-bike revolution. I do think one of the, even just a few years ago when we wrote the bike plan, technology has changed dramatically, and we've seen the rapid and widespread adoption of electric bikes. That one of the highest demographics I see on the bike lanes are actually, they look a lot more like my father or grandfather than they do me. So we're seeing a lot of diversity in age coming out. What would love to hear your thoughts there about any sort of environment scan the Energy Transition Committee's done in terms of the technical mode shift.
I would just say that transit is obviously based on how likely someone is to take up a certain mode of transport is based on how accessible and how mobile that form of transport is. And e-bikes makes bikes much more mobile. It reduces the level of entry like physically, and it increases how far you can go. So obviously it's a huge benefit that amplifies any infrastructure we put in. And I would also like to add in something I didn't put in our main conversation, but this could take us into the conversation of e-cargo bikes and last mile delivery and stuff, things that we have yet to tackle as a city. So the e-bikes make a huge, they're an amplifier to this conversation. That's what I would say to this.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. Jacob, do you want to tap in?
Yeah, just to add that we don't yet know what the world's going to look like, or what innovations we're going to see, and last mile delivery is a good example. But I think with this plan, the big thing is we talk about the fact that this is foundational. I mean, we know we want to densify our city. We know we want 15-minute communities. We know we need a 50% modal shift. This is absolutely foundational. Without this, you don't have that transport hub to get people from those 15-minute communities. And we want to tap in, like Daniel said, in the end, we want to make this convenient because everybody here is a biker already. You know, these are the guys that will bike forever. We want to grab those people that haven't even thought of biking. You know what I mean? If you give them a safe option where they feel safe and they get to where they need to go, they'll start biking. They'll realize how fun it is, how easy it is. And then that'll happen organically. And instead of fighting the bike lanes, they'll start using them.
Thank you both. To Joseph Kerr, and actually to everyone, thank you so much for your presentations. And I'd ask you, if you have the chance to share your notes or any slides or photos, I saw some of you referencing things on your devices, if you can send them to council@edmonton.ca, then all of our colleagues can take a look at them too. That'd be very helpful, especially as the real battle is at the fall debate. But to Mr. Kerr, I was looking at your numbers, and are you aware 3 cents a day totals a whopping $10.95 a year? It sounds like a great deal.
Yes, I was doing roughly 1 million people in the city and looking at that $11 million. So it's about $11 a year per person.
Yeah, it's when you scale it, it really is like that's not even a seventh and eighth of a tank of gas right now. Like it's, and yet how many of us have seen my Netflix jump more than like it's really quite affordable. So yeah, I thank everybody again, and I think the real tension will be, we'll just have to wrestle with pace and dollars and the cost of inaction. So thank you for bringing it forward.
Is that it, Councillor Jans? Oh, okay.
Second panel, right? There's more speakers.
Oh.
No, aren't there?
No.
Don't we have more folks?
No, there are no
just
more public
administration.
speakers.
Oh, I thought we had two. I thought I heard panels, plural. Okay. I'll hang on and wait. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So I'm next. Mr. Kluchitzki, I just want to tell you, I'm a commuter and I do not hate cyclists, okay? Just to let you know. My son cycles as well to work, and I always tell him the same thing. Be very careful, watch, be aware. But my question for you is, do you think all the issues that you mentioned, do you think that option A is the best option to resolve those issues?
I do, especially what everyone's saying, like the amount of money that's going into people who drive cars, and like this, it's like such a small fraction. And since I go everywhere in the city, I'm not limited to one school. I'm going to every single school. Like there needs to be connections. Like every day, it's like, okay, I plan my trip. Oh, I go up this protected bike lane, and I'm gonna have to cross some crazy busy lane. So if we have these connections throughout the entire city, I don't have to have this like hard dropping moment of, oh, I need to leave this protection into this place, or I'm having to compete with people who are like in flying missiles, basically. So I do think that option A, again, as people are saying, even maybe a little bit more would be awesome. But I think option A is the best because it makes sure that those connections are all completed in the fastest possible time. Yeah, so that's that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the answer. And Ms. Weber, so you had mentioned 31% the climate crisis. Autos are responsible for 31% of that, correct? Is that what you were mentioning?
Yes, I believe it said in the energy, no, I think it was maybe the bike plan. One of the city documents said that was the percentage.
Okay, and do you think, with the new innovation that we have now, electric vehicles, hydrogen now, do you foresee that possibly there might be less contribution of vehicles with the new innovation?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting because the percentage will likely, it won't change a lot if we are consistent with changing all of our systems. Like the percentage won't decrease. I do think that electric vehicles definitely have a place, or like a place in making our transportation system more like environmentally friendly, I guess. But I don't think they're the only option because for a lot of people, having an electric vehicle is not something that's affordable. So even though they're increasing in prevalence, like I know for my family, we got a new vehicle like 2 years ago, and like a electric vehicle was out of our price range. So I think for many families and stuff, it's not something that they can consider, which is why we need to have a bike lane to complement those changes that we're seeing elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Latower, are you there still? Yes, I see you there.
Yeah, I am still here.
Okay, thank you. I heard you, mentioning about personal safety, which, is a priority of everyone's. Do you think, I'll ask you the same question. Do you think A is the best option for personal safety?
Yeah, I do believe that A is the best option, is just by being able to put in bike lanes more quickly, just building that infrastructure up really enables safer bike commuting to happen across the city. Like I do bike recreationally as well, and I've gone into those segments of the city, and it's unfortunate to say, like, I've been cycling through there and I don't really try planning bike routes through there just because of feeling of personal safety. And then that could be reflected even on things such as like Strava heat maps, where you just see the density of cycling activity within our city, and it's really reflective of the infrastructure that's available.
Okay, great, thank you. Those are the questions for me. I'll have some for administration, but that's it for me now. Any other questions? A second round for anyone? No? Okay, well, I would like to thank all of our speakers for coming today, and you're welcome to stay. We are going to ask questions of administration now. So once again, thank you. Okay, so hello again, administration. We will go to Councillor Salvador for questions.
Yeah, thank you. And just want to express gratitude for the report as well, and for the options that were presented. So I have a few questions about just the operational costs, and the numbers that were presented in attachment 3. So I'm trying to understand how those costs would actually be reflected and how they would ramp up over time. And I'm just, looking at option C, for example, the table provides an annual operational cost of $9 million. But in terms of our 4-year budget, that implementation would take time to complete. So what would that look like?
Yeah, so some of the operational costs would be incurred immediately because those education and encouragement programs would roll out right away. But some of the other costs, such as the snow clearing and maintenance, would only be required as the infrastructure is actually installed. So this is a higher level estimate, but generally the cost would start lower and increase as more of the infrastructure is completed. So the numbers provided are kind of assume that everything is completed.
Okay, that's helpful. So as that network would roll out, we'd see the costs associated with maintenance and snow clearing sort of incurred at that time, but wouldn't necessarily be taking, for option A, for example, sort of that $11 million operational cost right at the outset. My understanding is correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And then just a question around the high bike trip potential area. So one of our speakers pointed out a bit of a discrepancy between what was included in the bike plan implementation guide and the current report that's in front of us, sort of the shaded yellow area, particularly in the west central end of Edmonton. And I know Councillor Knack had a similar question about that one. Can you explain why there's a difference?
So I think this just might be a little bit of confusion between the high bike trip potential and the area network plans. So the area network plans identified a few different areas of the city where we think it makes sense to go in and do more focused planning on the area networks. This is based on the bike trip potential, which was just a geospatial analysis done with the bike plan. So this was based on population, land use, and employment, and looks at the areas most likely to generate bike trips, and that's figure 6 in the bike plan.
Okay, that's helpful. So yeah, we're seeing high bike trip potential areas, not necessarily the area network plans. That's right?
That's correct.
Okay. Great. And then just to zoom out, we heard from a lot of our speakers a strong desire for option A and for option C. What would it look like to combine those approaches?
So option A and option C actually do have a lot of overlap. They're just slightly different approaches to prioritization. So option A focuses on citywide coverage as fast as possible, and option C is a little bit more targeted. So option C does include expansion of the district connector network, but not necessarily all of it. Overall, about 75% of what's included in options A and B would be included in option C as well.
Wow, okay. So that's more overlap than I anticipated. Okay, so 75% of what's included in option C would be included in option A. Did I understand that correctly?
The other way around.
Sorry, the other way around.
Yep.
Option A. Okay, gotcha. Great. And then how would that, I assume there would be not just overlap in terms of the routes, but some efficiencies and overlap in terms of the actual funding and associated costs then. If we're combining or contemplating combining A and C, it's not like we'd be looking at 170 plus 130. It's not just simple addition, right?
Yep, that's correct. There's overlap in the costs as well.
Okay.
So if it was the desire of committee to combine those and for administration to further look at those, that's the work. We would have to do some work to understand that.
Right, okay, and I guess if that direction was to be given, that's something that could come before us at budget?
If it was the direction or the will of committee for a service package to come forward, yes.
Right. Okay, excellent. And then I do just have to ask about substandard roots. Again, this was just flagged by by some constituents that some of the solid purple lines that are currently marked as existing routes, some of them are just signs on roadways or sharrows in some cases. And would the upgrading of those substandard routes be part of this work as well, or at least some of them?
Yes, so the bike plan identifies the need to look at substandard routes in those locations. So while they are showing as existing as part of the network, that work is still part of what would be needed to complete.
Okay, excellent. I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Salvador. Councillor Paquette?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Principe. So I've got a quick question about like how we determine, to follow up on Councillor Salvador, you know, not everything has to be a fully built out bike lane. Some areas have lower traffic and you can simply use the road. And I'm assuming that is what is contemplated here, that to save costs, you just maybe like throw a paint line in or even just indicate that that is a bike route. Is that right? Because I'm not sure if I actually subscribe to that, but I know that that may be the thinking.
Yeah, so this doesn't necessarily predetermine what we expect the infrastructure type would be. The design and construction standards provide some guidance about what type of infrastructure might be appropriate in different situations. So it would have to be looked at kind of on a route by route and context basis.
Yeah, because I think when people think about it, so for example, in my neighborhood, very, very slow moving, but no one rides on the road anyway. They just don't feel safe. So there's a psychological component here, and I'm just wondering if we've contemplated that.
Oh, yes, yeah, perceived safety and psychological safety is an important part of the all ages and abilities way of understanding the bike network. So not only what makes people safe, but also ensures that people feel safe and comfortable, and that is part of what we look at when we decide what type of infrastructure to use.
Yeah, because I can tell you 0 families ride on the road. They're all on the sidewalks. So the other thing is how we build it out. Like, for example, on Victoria Promenade, not quite as nice looking as it could be. I'm just wondering if we're getting any thoughts to the aesthetics so that people actually are proud of their city and they don't have massive objections to seeing a bike lane put in because they feel like it's going to uglify their neighborhood.
Councillor Paquette, I do think a lot of that was contemplated with the downtown network that was rolled out and some of the beautification that was done as well. But all of that comes at an increased cost. And so part of the work that we're doing here is looking at rapid implementation of the bike network. And I would say beautification in terms of flowers, et cetera, would probably come as part of a different city program. But I see some ops has just taken their camera off. Perhaps they'd like to add to my answer.
Hi, Jessica Lamar here from Parks and Roads. The project that you're referring to, Councillor, was done with existing materials available to us. We know that folks are not a big fan of the look of traffic control materials in a semi-permanent state on their roads. That totally makes sense. So I think as a part of this work, we would be collaborating together to identify if there are other kinds of materials that wouldn't increase cost significantly, for example, that we may be able to use, but that would be part of the work to come.
Yeah, okay. And I missed the very first part of Councillor Salvador's question, so I don't know if she asked this, but operating costs. In the first year, there'd be, I mean, next year would be basically nothing. It will slowly ramp up as the network goes out. So I think in the report, there's sort of like this sticker shock of like, oh, look at those operating costs. But that's not really the reality for the full next 8 years, is it?
That's correct, Councillor Paquette. The operating costs would be less in the first year and then more towards the end of that 8 years.
Right. And then we can just assume that that would be like the normal operating costs of, say, a road network. So it's just sort of, we're just separating it out, even though it's all part of our infrastructure costs, infrastructure maintenance costs and operating costs, right?
We're separating it out because we would need direction from council and committee, or for committee and then from council in order to contemplate this work as part of the budget process. So it needs to be separated out so that there could be an unfunded service package advanced.
Yeah, I guess I was curious because we don't do that with new bridges and roads that I've seen. We don't separate the operating costs out. New road lanes, for example, things like that. So Just wondering why.
It's a good question. Somebody from operations able to answer why would we treat those differently?
Because I'm wondering if we added all of those all of those costs up and presented to the public, that sticker shock might be extremely minimal.
I think you're correct in saying that the number would be very large.
Yeah. Okay, looks like we're out of time. I'll circle around because you were going to tag someone to answer that question, so hopefully they can answer it when I come back around. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. Councillor Stevenson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks to my colleagues for already asking a number of the technical questions I had just around, I'm so pleased to know that substandard links will be upgraded as part of this work. The aesthetics things I think is also very important. And I think part of that too is even just doing less and not to use a questionable phrase, but some of the over engineering I think we saw in some of the earlier bike lanes with lots of signage, which I think sort of detracted from the aesthetics. That's exciting to hear that will be part of the work. So yeah, having those technical questions answered, I maybe just want to move to some higher level ones. I think we have our experience in Edmonton has been that when we have provided bicycle infrastructure, ridership has increased. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, Councillor, that is correct. And the bike plan was at committee in February, and there were some statistics there that saw represented some very big increases as soon as that infrastructure, the following year from when that infrastructure was in place.
Amazing. So we have that data, we have that demonstration that if we build it, people will come. That's wonderful. And actually on that, I know that we previously had sort of visible bike counters in the downtown, at least, that would show live information of number of users. Just wondering what's happened to that data and if we are able to maybe reinstall those signs, or if there's sort of online dashboards that might be made available.
There are a number of permanent bike and pedestrian counters throughout the city, and the data is posted online. It is available through open data.
Oh, that's great, but we don't have the sort of visible counter signs anymore?
No, and I can't speak further to what happened with those.
Okay. Yeah, because I think, again, that's a really great feedback mechanism to sort of demonstrate the value of these investments. I was also wondering, I think the focus of today, we're looking at different sort of pricing options. I feel like there's maybe also continues to be a bit of a policy piece. So I'm just thinking of a neighborhood renewal project that's happening in my ward. And, one of the streets, which is identified as a district connector, is being redone as part of that. But it's not being slated for fully separated bicycle infrastructure. And again, there were a lot of trade-offs. It's definitely a complex question, but I feel like that is that's detrimental to the build out overall. So just wondering if you could talk me through, again, I feel like it's not just the budget we need to approve, but also those other policy shifts that we need. Would direction on this provide that higher level policy direction for a range of other projects?
Councillor Stevenson, I believe it would, in that the report outlines that a number of approaches in terms of adaptable infrastructure will need to be used in order to accelerate this rollout. But if anybody from the infrastructure department wants to contemplate that it would be different, I would encourage you to chime in now.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a good, just in terms of instances where there is the funding through Renewal to be doing the full, so not the adaptable infrastructure, but sort of the permanent infrastructure. Just wondering, yeah, what the approach there would be.
Just jumping in, Councillor Stevenson, Ryan Kirstiak from Neighborhoods Planning and Design. So as mentioned previously, the bike plan doesn't specify what type of infrastructure is to be built. Those decisions are determined based on context of the neighborhood or roadway that we're working in. So at times, physical constraints can influence what we put in, knowing that we are aligning that infrastructure to the bike plan as well. So there are physical constraints that we work with, but seek to achieve the objectives as part of the bike plan.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I think that's a really important point, and something that I think I might seek greater clarity on, just in terms of when we say we're doing this full build out, what's that minimum threshold that is sort of you know, separated unless proven otherwise, and there would have to be some pretty significant mitigating reasons to not do. But I'm out of time, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Jans?
Thank you very much. Just looking to administration on the costing here, is the price per kilometer, or whatever sort of metric we look at here, is that fairly consistent with previous built experience here?
I would need somebody from the infrastructure department to be able to answer that. The price per kilometer contemplated in the report, is it similar to what we have experienced before? Say, I know construction costs have been going up because of inflation, et cetera. So I would say they're probably close to in line in terms of the part where we are in the PDDM model. It's very early in the process. Mrs. Zerko?
Sure. No worries. You can circle back on that one if somebody's not available. Oh, they are? Okay.
I can jump in on that just quickly. Ms. McCabe, as Ms. McCabe mentioned, we are seeing some costs go up in our recent economic situation. That being said, we are very, very early in a lot of these projects. And so you are seeing some costs that do look very high because of the uncertainty with the level of planning that we're at. But that being said, construction costs throughout this year have been higher than we've seen in past years.
Even though mostly what we're talking about here is asphalt and concrete, we're not necessarily talking about beautiful steel bridges here.
Asphalt and concrete is still laid by people at the end of the day, and
so there's the human costs.
There's human costs associated with that. Yeah.
All right. Federal funding. So the federal government announced $400 million for active transportation across Canada. Last I checked, we haven't heard from them about a check for capital. Is that still the case? No announcement?
That is my understanding.
Is there anything we as council could do, or the public who are listening could do, to enhance our ability to get our fair share of the piggy bank there?
Continued advocacy at the federal government level, for sure.
Okay, thank you. I love the line of questioning that Councillor Paquette was talking about in terms of the road lanes and the operating costs. As a new councillor, once you start to unpack the cost of snow removal, filling potholes, everything else, it's I don't even have an adjective to describe how expensive it is. So I am interested I'm not sure if Councillor Paquette was being rhetorical or if he was actually looking for the road lane costs, but the more we can unpack that as fall budget, just to show what a fraction of that amount, I think would actually be very helpful in terms of communication. A little just that's more commentary there. For a technical question, I had a little trouble trying to see some of the missing links. Like I saw McKinnon Ravine is still listed as a connection to the west side. The Laurier route I see is listed, but that's basically a dirt path, and it's very treacherous to bike down towards the Horlick Park Bridge there. So as I was looking at the plan, I was trying to think, two of our main nodes and connectors are the U of A and West Edmonton Mall, and I was trying to measure how folks could get to either A or B of those destinations. And whatever plan the committee recommends, say we pick A and C or whatever combination, is there a way to still flag other missing links that we think need to be prioritized that could be major connectivity gaps?
I think we're always open to receiving more input and more ideas about where there are gaps in the network that we need to fill in. We'd have to evaluate how the resources allocated allow us to include additional routes in this work.
So so if I can paraphrase, the question that was asked by Councillor Salvador was, bring us an option to take the 10-year bike plan, essentially, and bring it down to 4 years. Instead of 2030, make it 2026 for completion. and admin basically brought back two options, or which is basically A and C or B and D, or like do you want to go fast? You do A, not B. You want to go fast? You do C, not D. Is that kind of the delta here in terms of the difference on most of these is just in terms of the timing, in terms of elongating the process?
That would be correct for A and B. So those are both doing the same thing over different periods of time. The differences with C and D is that they're slightly different priorities. So A and B focus on citywide coverage with the basic district connector network, where C and D start to provide more targeted strategic elements.
So if I wanted to build out the full bike plan in 4 years, what that service package recommended from today would be essentially an A and C combination that would have admin doing a combination proposal of that on the menu.
Yeah, that would provide the most coverage over 4 years.
Then I'll look to Councillor Salvador, but I think that was the intent of the motion. So, and I would be happy to speak in support of that if we have an opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jans. We'll take this time now to take our break, and we will convene our meeting at 3:45.
Yes, please. Just committee members, yeah, and then you can acknowledge anybody else if you want, yeah.
Just don't acknowledge the elephant in the room.
Welcome back. It's 3:45. Time to roll again. We're going to start with a roll call. Just of committee members. Councillor Salvador will be right back, but Councillor Paquette, are you
Hello.
there? Hi. And we have the mayor. Hello, Mr. Mayor.
Hi, everyone, including
And-
Councillor Paquette.
And I'm here, so I believe we have quorum.
That is correct.
All right, so we will continue with questions of administration. Councillor Jans?
Yes, has Councillor Salvador rejoined? So hearing none, I guess then I just wanted to clarify the cost then with administration. Am I understanding the math correctly that if we were to propose now to put forward option A and option C, that effectively that's not the same as just adding the monetary cost of those two items, that in fact there would be efficiencies in those items, and I think I heard 75%. So admin would then go forth and bring back a different figure for budget. Is my math correct?
That's correct, Councillor Jans. Option A and option B cannot be added together. But if they were combined, then we would have to go do the math of what that would look like for the budget process.
Both in the monetary cost and in the kilometer cost, or the number of kilometers paved or created.
That's correct.
Okay, that is helpful. Yeah, I'll yield to the committee members. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jans. Mayor Sohi?
Yeah, sorry I missed the presentation and the questions. So if I repeat questions, I apologize. Just want to get a sense on where does the integration of cycling infrastructure and ETS, public transit, fit in? Just my specific question is on the last mile connection, right? Where does that fit into any of the options that are presented?
So the bike plan, the network plan does think about integration with transit and ensuring connections to transit centers and LRT stations. So that is kind of built into the network that would be built out under any of the options.
So A, B, C, right?
Yeah, because ultimately we're still looking towards the same ultimate network, and all of those networks do focus on making sure that we do have those multimodal connections.
So, that's good to know. And also on the storage, for example, safe storage of bikes at LRT stations or bus stations.
Yeah, so that would be also considered, and that would be part of the operating and other measures that we can take. So there's the network itself building, and then there's all of these other pieces that the city can do to support biking. So bike parking, secure bike parking, storage at LRT stations is all part of that.
The operational cost that has been identified within these options, does that include some of that additional cost, or that cost you're talking about?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so it's included in that, right? And the quality of the infrastructure, we hear a lot about. Can you walk me through a bit? Like, what kind of infrastructure are we building? Is it kind of a bike lanes on the roads that we see on 100 Avenue, or is something like we see on 102nd Avenue? Because as you heard from some of the speakers, people need to feel safe and comfortable using the infrastructure once we build it.
Yeah, so we can't speak specifically to what type of infrastructure would be used in each location, but the bike plan does provide some direction in terms of ensuring that all new routes are built to be safe and comfortable for all ages and abilities. But that varies based on the context, so kind of every location would have to be looked at individually to understand what all age and abilities means in that location.
And if I might add, Mr. Mayor, I think we've learned the lesson that putting out substandard infrastructure in areas where we have high demand of vehicles and or high demand of biking doesn't serve us well if we want people to be able to shift their modes and use biking. So the bike plan has contemplated that, and that is based on the premise of the bike plan, the right infrastructure for the right location.
Now, thank you for that, because we should build quality infrastructure and or not build at all. Because if people are not going to use it, not feel safe, then what's the point? Then you end up irritating many other people.
I agree.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So, and following up on Councillor Jen's question on it's not the cost of, like if you add A, B, and C, it's not tripling the cost. It's more about figuring out, okay, some of their overlaps in these options.
That's correct. Please do not add them together.
Yes, because that, all right, so does option A does not include the district connectors, does it?
Yes, option A focuses on the district connectors specifically.
Oh, sorry. Option C. Sorry.
So option C includes some district connectors.
Okay.
It doesn't include all of them.
It does not include all of them. And if you combine C and B, then it may do some, right?
Yes, because option B also includes all of the district connectors.
Okay. Because from equity point of view, I think that is important that, yes, we need to build infrastructure where needs are the greatest, but also in suburban communities or redeveloping communities, having those connections to, I think it's more about having a complete pathway in a way. Like if I want to get on my bike from Millwoods, I want to feel safe coming downtown, and there should be good connections. Like if Michael lives White Avenue, right, he can easily get into downtown safe way. But somebody living in suburban communities may not be, right? So, and if you want to shift our mode of transportation and make a real impact on greenhouse gas emissions, that's what I'm getting at. So an equity lens to that.
Yep, absolutely. The citywide district connector network ensures broad connectivity across the city.
Okay, thanks. I'm out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to acknowledge that Councillor Salvador has joined us. And Councillor Wright, you're next.
Hi, thank you very much. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a little bit, maybe. But first of all, I do want to say there's many residents in Wards Pomatapi, and I would love to see all those purple dotted lines connected as well for them, especially for some maybe high-profile constituents like Mayor Sohi, who I've heard say that he couldn't safely ride his bike up 50th Street. So I do see the importance and how this fits in with the city plan, but from a different perspective, I'm just wondering, option D that nobody's talked about yet. What if that was accelerated to be completed by 2026? Would we just double the numbers there or not? Would we just add up the numbers there?
Like add up the numbers for the 2 budget cycles that are provided?
Yes, yeah.
Like you could for a high level estimate, but we'd probably have to go back and confirm.
Okay, but it would be.
If that was the will of committee, I would suggest we'd need a motion, Councillor Wright, to explore that further.
Okay. Just asking that way, something's accelerated to get it completed at a lower cost. And then I'm also wondering about the annual operating costs for options A and C. It says it'll be dependent on future priorities. So does the operating costs include like the maintenance, like the snow removal and all that?
Yes, the operation costs include routine maintenance, snow removal, and then also the supportive programming for bike infrastructure.
Okay. And then I had, I was wondering about the barriers. So, and I think it's been stated a few times that it's not necessarily, wouldn't be permanent barriers sort of installed with each lane. So it would give greater access, but not necessarily safer, or it still would be done in a safe way?
Are you asking about the barriers identified on the map?
Oh, no, sorry, the barriers between the bikes and the vehicles.
Councillor Wright, the adaptable infrastructure that's contemplated in the report would still absolutely be safe, installed in a safe way, and would make the network overall safer for Edmontonians.
And I think I had one other question. Oh, in regards to, in attachment 2, it talks about public readiness. I'm just wondering how we can do better to get all Edmontonians on board with this.
Councillor, that's a great question and something that we have identified during the development of this report, that this would be a big change if fully accelerated, and that we would have to look at public engagement and the way that we do public engagement as we advance this work. I think a lot of getting Edmontonians on, if I may, sorry, just talking about the why this is important. It's important from a perspective of everybody being able to get around in our city in a very safe way. It's important in terms of the why, in terms of meeting climate change, our climate change goals. And it's important from an economic development perspective. Companies have looked at cities that have bike lanes as a way to be able to attract and retain talent to our city. So there's a number of whys, and if there was a desire, council, we could supply you with some of those whys as well.
Okay, I'm just wondering, would that
send some key messages?
Would that public readiness be ready in time for budget?
Councillor, I don't think no. This is, as with the city plan, is a long-term change for Edmontonians, but this was a change that was identified that Edmontonians wanted in terms of making our city more equitable, making our city more sustainable, making our city more prosperous. And I'd be happy to supply in a memo some of the why key messages for council in terms of why our bike lane's important prior to budget to help you navigate that space. But that's something that we're going to have to continually navigate together, and through our public engagement, we'll make sure to anchor it in terms of the why this work is important.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it. And I'm out of time.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Rice?
Thank you. My apologies, I couldn't use the video and because I'm outside using my phone to join this meeting. I do have one quick question. My understanding is that we are talking about our infrastructure investment for the future transportation. So transportation has 3 types: bike, car, and public transit. Do we have the specific data? What's the population for each of this type of transportation?
We do, Councillor Rice, and as the team looks it up, we also have a target of what we're looking to achieve as a city, and it's 50% of all trips by active modes, which is 50% of people biking, walking, taking transit as part of the city plan.
And we do have, so the most recent statistics we have is from 2015, so these are a bit old. But at that time, we had about 57% people as car drivers, about 20% as car passengers, 12.5% for active transportation, and about 10% of transit. I would also note that this survey showed that cycling was the fastest growing mode of transportation at the time, that it had more than doubled between 2005 and 2015.
Okay, so for that type of percentage, that type of data, how we can reflect those data and into our budget discussion and also the long-term planning and for cities transportation?
Councillor Rice, my suggestion to council would be just to focus on the targets as outlined in the city plan and advancing priorities through the budget process that are tied to the city plan. So things that will help us achieve our greenhouse gas targets, things that will help you achieve your active transportation targets.
Okay, so I agree with all the benefits I heard today and really appreciate every public speakers bring those benefits and then to increase that awareness. And also I ask another data and for the decision-making evidence. So do we have any traffic data and specifically to demonstrate unsafe on the current bike lines or ride in our city?
Councillor Rice, yes, we do have data that shows that without proper facilities, it's not as safe for people to be able to get around in our city. And I'd perhaps ask somebody from operations to provide some of that data.
Councillor Rice, Jessica Lamar from Parks and Roads here. Through the Safe Mobility Strategy, we do an annual Vision Zero report where we do take a look at the crashes that have happened over the last year and report on causes. When we take a look at the crashes that caused injury and fatality related to cyclists, the vast majority of those crashes were caused by driver error, and the huge majority happen outside of the protected bike network. So these are places where we don't have this safer infrastructure in place already.
Okay, so the last question, if we have so many our Edmontonians complain about the condition of the roads for car drive, so when we when city moving forward to build this long-term infrastructure for the bike lane work, and that type of condition for the drivers on the roads will be accordingly to make change or not, or just leave the condition as it is and only focus on the infrastructure on the bike network development?
Councillor Rice, there'll be a number of capital budget profiles that will be road focused, there'll be a number that will be transit focused, and there'll be a number that are bike focused. I think what's before you today is one that's contemplating just bikes, but I can assure you in the capital budget you'll see a number of profiles that also support road movements.
Okay, thank you. That's my question.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Paquette?
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, and just a note on that, I'm just, as our population grows, the stress on our roads is going to increase. The maintenance costs for our roads are going to increase. This is one of the outlet valves, isn't it? I mean, we're not going to stop.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Paquette. This is one of the outlet valves in terms of if you provide other ways to get around the city, then there's other options for people. Not everybody has to drive all the time.
Yeah. Okay, so when we were talking a little bit earlier, I think Stacey was about to hop on about the cost of maintenance for roadways, which we don't get included in reports for operations and things like that. So why, I don't think we got to the question of why that cost was included in this report.
It's a very good question, and I'm not sure that anybody has a great answer for you today on that.
Okay, no worries. So let's shift gears a little bit, and this is a little silly, but last week I was watching Rocky 2 with my kids, and they were buying a home, and the interest rate was 9.5% for lending, and I took a note of that, and I thought, geez, we're seeing inflation. Interest rates are only going to go up. So the longer we wait on this, I'm a little bit worried about what the impact of borrowing might be. So is it better then economically to sort of strike now rather than wait another few years?
I think that's a decision for council to make in terms of through the budget process and the many competing priorities that you'll have before you.
For sure. Okay, and I noticed that one of the issues I've got in my ward is that at one point it was proposed that there would be a pedestrian bridge going over Manning Freeway to get the Manning Town Center, because the freeway has one crosswalk at 153rd Ave, and that's about it. And so for a massive part of the community, it is very difficult to get over there by bike or by foot. And so when we're looking at these build-outs, is there room as we go forward, if committee and council passes this in their wisdom, to take a look at some of those missing throughways? Because mine is certainly not the only one in that area. So across the city, there's probably some improvements we could make.
Yes, I think we're always open to hearing about more opportunities for improvement and new connections. And again, it would just have to evaluate what can be done within the resources that are allocated at this stage.
Okay, fair enough. but that's not a no.
No, it is not.
Okay. All right. And let's see. When one of the benefits being touted in the Alberta is Calling ad campaign is bikeability, and I know that Calgary is much further ahead of it than we are. So if we can move more rapidly, would that be in keeping with sort of the provincial move to attracting people to our city?
Absolutely. Having a robust bike network will attract people to our city for sure.
Yeah, perfect. And that's what we want. We just want to be in partnership there and making sure that, as you said, corporations are looking for bike lane networks. So that would be one of the things. Okay, so and then of course we're saying bike lanes here, but really it's not just for bikes, is it?
No, it's not.
Yeah. So can anyone sort of just give me a overview of the type of people who are using these lanes?
I would say everyone, and I would hate to paint that picture because it's probably inaccurate, but every Edmontonian is what we're looking for.
Yeah, and well, I've noticed myself that there are people on scooters. There are seniors who are in their electric chairs. There's families. There's all sorts of people who are using these lanes. So it's not just bike lanes. This is actually sort of like communal use. The whole community is using this. Just hopefully less cars than we see sometimes in those lanes. All right, so I think that's it for my time. Thank you so much for your questions. My hope is that motion gets forward where we do as much as humanly possible, as fast as possible. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. Mayor Sohi?
Just a few additional questions on the, I think during the last municipal election, bike infrastructure was a topic of discussion. And what I heard from a lot of people that I engaged with, that people want choice, right? If they want to drive, they want a choice. If they want to walk, they want a choice. If they want to ride their bike, they want a choice. And transportation should provide, infrastructure should provide those choices. And this is exactly what we're talking about. And also an equity issue too. We have not invested in sustainable modes of transportation in equitable way, particularly cycling infrastructure when we compare to public transit or roadway infrastructure. Am I right in that assessment?
Mr. Mayor, I think we can make that assessment at a very high level. We'd have to get you the data to fully support it.
Overall,
but yes, overall,
yeah,
yes, correct.
And there's no tension. Some people try to polarize this issue, but during the election, I did not see polarization. I saw people want to work together to provide choices to Edmontonians to move around. And we need to kind of follow that path of engagement to bring people along with on this.
I would agree with that in terms of choice is what people are looking for.
Okay. On the whether we go C plus A, when I look at the chart, it does not mean that 11 million plus 9 million in operational cost, right?
Please do not do that math.
That's okay. That's good. One question I have is, if we try to do more within confined amount of time, say we try to do this within the next budget cycle instead of 2 budget cycles, is the cost going to go up? That's what I need to know in order to make a decision during budget. Is it constraining the timelines would get us to do less, build less, if we were to spread out the timeline?
It's very difficult to give you a definitive answer on that. There are some risks that could come with doing it a little bit too fast that we could pay later on. However, like you're saying, if we don't move fast on it, there's other costs that we would miss out on by doing it quickly. So definitely very difficult to answer that question at this time.
But would you be able to give some high-level analysis when you come back, part of the budget discussion, even though there's not too much time?
We can contemplate that as part of the budget process to be able to answer your questions, not as part of the budget package,
Yeah,
but as
but
part of the questions, we can
yeah,
think through how we'd answer that question in a better way, Mr.
Yeah,
Mayor.
yeah, and okay, that'll be good information to have. The other is the capacity to deliver. If we try to do it fast, can you actually deliver it and deliver quality infrastructure?
That is the goal, and that is why we have put some of the amounts in terms of the engagement needed for even going fast. But do want to caution that it will take political will as well, not just administration's ability to move quickly on this. It also will take some political will to move quickly on this.
What does that mean? Well,
Council support, budget and council support for the full implementation, because we will take engagement differently than we would do engagement differently than we would for today.
Okay, so it may not be as robust an engagement?
That's probably correct, yes.
Okay.
That's probably the right word to use.
Okay, okay. Well, I think that's good to know, because we would have to back our decision with, and I think we need to make that decision absolutely fully understanding that there may be some compromise on the consultation. Okay, no, that's the questions I had, and look forward to our discussion during budget. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, Councillor Salvador.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd like to move that administration bring forward an unfunded capital profile and related unfunded service package to the 2023-2026 budget deliberations, advancing option A and option C as presented in report UPE 01101, Bike Network Redeveloping Area Completion Options.
Thank you, Councillor Salvador. We have a motion on the floor.
And may I introduce?
You can introduce, please.
Awesome.
That doesn't need a seconder, but if it did, I'd be there for you.
I appreciate the enthusiasm, Councillor Burkett. So I think, I really appreciate the conversation today. Again, I want to thank all the speakers who came out this afternoon, who really underscored the importance of getting going on this critical work. We heard from speakers that this is about safety, health, climate action, equity, and really building a city that works for everyone. And I couldn't agree more. We heard through questions of administration that there's actually considerable overlap between options A and C, and advancing this motion will allow us to get further information on that as we go into budget. Moving forward with option A and C, I think allows us to build on existing momentum and work that's already underway for high bike trip potential areas as well as the near-term priorities. At the same time, it allows us to get going on the basic district connector network in the redeveloping areas. And I think that is really critical from an equity perspective as well, as we heard from our speakers. And yes, this does represent a significant investment in active transportation infrastructure, but I think that that's reflective of the speed and scale of action that we need to take in order to respond to the urgency of the climate emergency that we're currently facing. So I'll leave it there for an introduction, and I'll have some closing comments as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Salvador. Does anyone have any questions to the mover? Any more questions or discussion? Councillor Paquette.
Oh, no questions, just to speak.
Okay, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just to sign in here. Here you go. Okay. I don't know if this question was asked earlier on. In order to do this or any of the combination of options, we applied for federal funding, right? But we haven't heard back on the capital.
That's correct.
And we don't know the timelines yet.
We don't.
Okay. Okay. Maybe we need to make some phone calls to find out. And I'll take that up on myself to do so. We don't need a motion. I'll just make calls and find out if when we'll be here. I think we'll end up getting our share of the $500 million federal program. So, okay, on the And combining, once again, you'll present us with new information, then accurate or as accurate as possible, the cost.
That's correct.
Plus A and
It'll
A.
be less than A plus B.
Yes, no, but whatever that's going to be, and you'll answer those questions. Yeah, okay, then can I speak to it, just so you don't have to?
Sure,
sign
you
it?
can, yeah.
No, thank you, Council Salvador, for your leadership on this and working with stakeholders and partners and engaging with them over the last number of months. Really appreciate that leadership. I think we need to create options for people to move around in a safe, sustainable way. And cycling infrastructure has been lacking in our city. I remember my days when I was city councillor. I used to ride my bike all the way from Millwoods to downtown. And when I got on a safe pathway, it was very comfortable and enjoyable. But when I was riding on 50th Street or 66th Street, it was terrifying. And I think we need to make sure that people, when they get on their bike, regardless of their age or ability, and they should feel comfortable, they should feel safe. And the more we can do that will allow us to shift the mode of transportation as part of a city plan to getting 50% of the trips to be using sustainable mode of transportation, and also integrated system with public transit, LRT buses, and cycling, walking, and all that, right? I think we have been lacking, and we need to catch up. And I hope that during the budget discussion, we'll be able to make a decision that will allow us to catch up. It's also about equity as well. I think all of our citizens, residents pay taxes, and they need to enjoy the quality infrastructure. All of them need to have that access to quality infrastructure. And cycling infrastructure has been lacking. So look forward to our discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Stevenson?
Yes, just to speak briefly.
Just to
so again,
speak? Sorry, just hold on, Councillor Stevenson. Sorry about that. Councillor Jans, just to speak? Okay, then we'll, anybody else for questions? Councillor Salvador, do you have any questions to yourself?
No, just to speak.
Just to speak. Okay, so we'll go back to Councillor Paquette, who was first to speak. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Councillor Principe. Unlike Councillor Salvador, I have many questions for myself all the time. I'm glad to see she has so much confidence. I hear a lot of, this has been a long conversation, and a lot of it has been driven by making it a wedge issue, making it a political issue, rather than an issue about economics and numbers. And the good thing is the economics and the numbers don't lie. And, back in 2015, we saw a massive increase in a shift to alternate forms of travel and commuting besides cars and vehicles. And that was in 2015. And I'll tell you, in 2015, looking around, I didn't see a lot of people cycling. Now I see it all the time. So when we get those updated numbers, I think it's going to be astounding to people. And that's only going to grow. And because it's going to grow, because we're heading toward a city of 2 million, we're already at 1 million people. We need to start thinking seriously about the infrastructure that keeps people safe and keeps people moving, and frankly, attracts people to move here and attracts investment. So one of the fiscal challenges that we've had as a city is that we built out according to car culture, which is fine, except that we just don't have the money for it. We have to start thinking more strategically. We have to start thinking more intelligently about where we put our dollars. As I mentioned, I've got an overpass going over, it's connecting Councillor Salvador's ward and mine over the Yellowhead. I think it's coming in at, I don't even want to guess. At the time, it was about $60 million. It's probably a lot more now. And no one batted an eye, and everyone saw the necessity. This is the same thing, only this benefits not just two neighborhoods being connected through vehicles, but it connects the entire city. And it allows families to cycle safer. It allows people to actually see their city in a different way. It's actually really phenomenal. And people say, yeah, but that works in Europe, that works in Copenhagen. Look, Copenhagen wasn't Copenhagen until they made these investments. It was developing like every other city. And they decided, their councils decided long ago to make these investments. And now you see school children en masse biking to school in the middle of a frozen, snowy winter. And this is happening across Northern European countries. And there's no reason why we can't do it here. In fact, the amount of winter cycling I've seen is also increasing. And if we actually had the infrastructure, people would feel safe to do that. And then there's consideration. People say, well, that's a lot of money. What's going to be the impact on my taxes? Well, the good news is because it's a capital investment, it will go on to debt supported. I think it will be debt supported. And some people say, well, we should get in debt. Sure, but on a city level, that debt instruments is actually a smarter way of doing things than tax support. Well, it's debatable, but you actually spend less initially, and you are able to make an investment that's paid out over time and does not rely on political wins. It's baked in, and it's just a really smart way to do things. And when we finally get to the operations, that will grow over time. And as I mentioned before, it's a little bit odd that we pulled that out just for this, but we don't do it for every other roadway that we've got. And so it may be painting maybe not a clear enough picture for the public, and maybe even be confusing the issue. But it's good to be aware of it. So more separation in these modes of transport will lead to less frustration for drivers, less wear and tear on roads and infrastructure, less costs in that. Understanding that we are not going to be seeing a decrease in car traffic, which is another argument for having this separation. We're only going to be seeing an increase. There's no way around it. But it will also mean less fear for everyone else. And for all of those reasons, and so many more, I fully support this motion. I anticipate council's supporting it, because if we are only looking at what the most logical and sensible thing to do, not just for our budget, but for our communities, this is it. And there is no argument stronger than the facts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you. Yeah, just very briefly, wanted to thank Councillor Salvador for her work on this. I'm really excited that these options are coming forward for us at budget, and to all city staff as well for getting these ready. I think about something I heard once, which is that you don't build bridges where you see a lot of people swimming across the river. Some people may say, oh, we don't see cyclists in our neighborhood yet. And that's because the infrastructure isn't there to support them. A bike lane is like a bridge. You need that physical, separated, safe space in order to enable this transportation choice. So I'm very, very excited to see this moving forward. I think it meets so many of our objectives to create a more sustainable and inclusive community. And thank you again to Councillor Salvador for your work on this.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Jans.
Thank you. Very early on in the term, I was and Councillor Paquette shared a similar story about a major employer downtown who wanted bike lanes, and that's why one of the reasons why the bike advocacy was so successful in 2015. And I had a similar experience with a different employer, a large insurance company, who the leader wrote me asking for what they called an inner bike Edmonton highway. They wanted to be able to seamlessly ride from South Edmonton to downtown on one contiguous route. And I see the motion that Councillor Salvador has put forward as effectively helping to get us there in terms of that inner Edmonton bike highway. So I think there's been some great debate today. We've heard some phenomenal speakers. I really appreciated Min sort of rolling up their sleeves and helping us get to this very important goal ahead of us. I think building on Mayor Sohi's point, and elections are a form of engagement, and we had one of the most animated anti-bike lane characters and a slate of folks who were spreading misinformation about cycling, about active transportation, and many of them lost, not just in Edmonton, but around the world. We saw that in Vancouver, an anti-bike candidate lost. In Paris, a candidate lost. And this is elections are a form of engagement, and we don't go out and engage with Edmontonians on every single bridge or roadway decision that we make. There's local engagement that certainly needs to happen, but the idea that we need to keep relitigating the idea of bike lanes over and over and over is incredibly frustrating. The climate emergency can't wait. We can't wait. We've had numerous conversations as a city, and I think it's time just to build it, and that's what's in front of us, getting this done in one term, and it's going to be a beautiful thing for the next generations. And I think every single parent here is sort of looking at the clock thinking, oh man, this would be great if I don't have to chauffeur my kids around all the time, if I can help them just bike to high school, if I can help them just get out safely to junior high or even elementary 4 years from now. It'd be a beautiful thing. So again, one of the just little pushback pieces, a constituent wrote me saying, just a reminder about winter, we average about only minus 25, or sorry, we only average below minus 20 about 25 times per winter. And even in January, there's approximately 13 days that have highs above freezing. Montreal and Ottawa get 70% more snow than us, crammed into 4 months instead of 6. And we do have snow on the ground for the longest of any Canadian city for, a solid 5 months or so. But really, once we get the snow clearing done, it's really easy to get around. And we saw that this year that I myself biked all through the year except for a couple of days in January when my car wouldn't even start. It was so cold, so I wasn't leaving the house, period. So we have the recipe, we have the capacity, and I think we just now need the funding. And I'm very excited to support this proposal, and I want to thank Councillor Salvador for her leadership in stick handling this through the journey thus far this year.
Thank you, Councillor Jans. Councillor Knack?
Let's see if I'm... Okay, am I unmuted?
We can hear you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Sorry I haven't been able to join. I'm away on city business, but I've been able to tune in since Mayor Sohi was offering some closing comments, and I understand what motion's on the floor. So just wanted to offer a few quick additional comments. Heard a bit of conversation already today about cost, and I think it's worth sort of repeating when you think about how much we've spent as a city on things like roads. And the amount that we're talking about today is still a small fraction of what we spend on a yearly basis on our roadway network. I mean, over the last 4-year budget cycle, we spent well over $1 billion over the last 4 years. That's not including major road projects like Terwillegar Expressway, Yellowhead expansion. This is just on other roadway work, arterial roadway reconstruction, neighborhood renewal, alley renewal, collector renewal, things that are important and we need to continue to do. But what we're talking about is again a small fraction of what you would see on that. So that's one area I think we need to constantly talk about because I do find still over the years, folks will talk about the downtown bike grid, and when you tell them the price was about $8 million and that about half of that was solely for traffic signal upgrades, you get a different response. People don't necessarily realize that there's been a fairly small amount. So that's one thing I just wanted to share. I think the other piece, and you've heard a few examples already, and I'll give one more. I remember the former general manager of BioWare when they were still at their south side location just off the White Mud, and talking about where they were going to move before they moved to Epcot Tower. And the general manager had stated quite clearly that the reason they had to move is because the staff that work there want to be able to use other modes of transportation. And if they don't get it, they weren't going to stay in Edmonton, because something like take the gaming industry or take many industries and how talent is exceptionally mobile now. And it's really important to provide those choices in a meaningful way. It's something I heard about year after year after year when sitting in the same room as the City of Edmonton Youth Council, and how a different demographic is looking to have a variety of different options. not to force people to bike, not to force people to use transit or force people to use any other mode of transportation, but just to make sure that there's a safe and viable option for people to choose if they don't want to have a car. You know, I always thought I would drive, and now I bike as my primary mode because it's good for my health. It's frankly really good for my budget, and I'm so glad I have that option. But it's not an option that's available to the vast majority of folks, even at this point in our city. And so that's something I'd like to see us address as we go forward. So apologies that I didn't get a chance to hear any of our speakers or any of the discussion beforehand, but just wanted to offer that as some additional commentary to what I hope at this point is now a conversation that is starting to turn the corner, and folks are starting to see the importance of having choice when deciding where to move. So we're a city that is really going to lean into this. People should be free to choose what mode of transportation they want. They should be free to choose where they want to live. And you need to give them those options in order to have that choice. So very supportive of this, and look forward to the next phase of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Councillor Rutherford?
Yes, thank you so much. First and foremost, echo my colleagues and Councillor Salvador and many on council that are championing this work that really is forward-thinking work within our city and bringing us to a city that we want to be in the future. I do want to take a minute, though, to heed the caution that is laid out in the report and put forward by administration on public engagement and fast tracking this. In the report, it talks about that not all areas of the city have the same level of readiness for this. And so I worry about, for example, 132nd Avenue and some of the work that's happening there, and it's getting a major upgrade. It's very exciting. But even with all the engagement that has happened on that project, there is still a lot of concern. And I imagine if that project was to have gone forward without that engagement and have been fast-tracked, where we would be today, because it's already got pushback. And so I really do think there's a balance here in terms of making sure we do things fast and we become a future city, but we do it in a right way. And I don't know what that looks like. And I think that's not necessarily a budgetary discussion, but I don't think it's something that we can shy away from or not address as a council or as administration in this conversation if we actually want to progress this work forward in a good way. So absolutely looking forward to this conversation at budget. Absolutely support bike and multimodal infrastructure across our city 1000%. And let's have a conversation then, if this does pass at budget, about how and where we need to really make sure we're still doing an engagement, and not in a way to create buy-in, because that's actually not creating good engagement, but in a way that allows all voices to be heard in these issues and really make sure that there is two-way communication. I know administration, from what I've been listening to, I was listening to on YouTube primarily this afternoon, you know, I don't think that they were direct enough with some of the caution flags around what could really be potential here. So I'm belaboring the point right now. Support this with that one caution flag of we cannot simply fast track this, not do engagement, and then stand within that. That is going to cause major harm to both our administration and some of the flack that they'll receive, as well as us politically. So as long as that caution flag is out there and we're considering that, I absolutely move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. I just wanted to clarify, Councillor Stevenson, you didn't have any further follow-up, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Sorry, I think that was from
Okay,
earlier.
yeah, okay, thank you. I will go now to Councillor Salvador to close.
Thank you, Councillor Principe. A lot of really excellent things have been said, so I won't go too long, but I just want to reiterate that building out a safe, connected, and comprehensive bike network is a basic requirement of an integrated multimodal transportation system. And thanks to Councillor Paquette for speaking to the economics of this, because it's not a nice to have, it's a necessity if we're serious about having a safe and functional transportation system that works for everyone. And we're talking about basic essential infrastructure, just like we build out roads and sidewalks so that people walking and driving can get around safely. We have to get serious about building out our active transportation network. And as Mayor Sohi mentioned, this is about transportation equity, and it's about choice as well. It's also about fulfilling the goals that we've set for ourselves in the city plan and the energy transition strategy. We have ambitious emissions reductions targets, and I'm worried that we're not on track to reach them, hence the need for accelerated action. We know that transportation accounts for about 30% of our emissions. We also know that mode shift is unlikely to occur unless people have infrastructure that makes them feel safe and routes that get them where they need to go. The vision for the city plan is really clear. 50% of trips by active and public modes, dense, connected, 15-minute communities where people can live locally and have a viable multimodal transportation system. And if we don't start taking intentional, deliberate, purposeful, forward-thinking steps towards these goals, we're only going to get further away from our targets. And yes, these steps cost money, but ultimately, we're making up for lost time. And a more robust network should have actually been built out a long time ago, from my perspective. Now we're facing a climate emergency, and we can't afford to take a decade or longer to build this critical component of transportation infrastructure. As was mentioned, our total spend on bike infrastructure has been incredibly limited compared with our spending on other major modes. And it's important to remember that there are quantifiable savings associated with active transportation infrastructure, ranging from reduced congestion, roadway cost savings, and vehicle cost savings to reduced air pollution, energy conservation, and traffic safety improvements. And just on the economic benefits as well, building out a safe, connected network, it's really become table stakes for a globally competitive city. As Councillor Knack mentioned, employers and firms are looking to set up shop in cities like Edmonton, and they're starting to look for cities that have safe bike infrastructure because they know that's what they need in order to attract and retain talent and employees. So yes, investing in active transportation is about climate action, it's about equity, economic competitiveness. It's also about health and recreation. I know that one didn't come up too much today, but there are physical and mental health benefits associated with using safe infrastructure for work and play. And finally, as I'm sure everyone has observed, COVID and the rise of e-bikes has contributed to significant growth in the number of people bicycling in this city. And I think now is the time to really seize that moment and support growth of our network. And then one point just on expediency. Expediency and acceleration does matter. We're starting from a place with relatively low route density and connectivity. Making it a viable and safe place to ride is something that we need to do in the short term if we hope to see significant progress on mode shift in the medium and long term. Taking 10 to 15 years to build that out will simply not get us to where we need to go. And I recognize this is an acceleration, but I firmly believe it's a necessary one. I want to again thank City Admin for getting all of this ready to go for today's conversation and for the conversations that are to come at budget. I also, just to Councillor Rutherford's point, I think there's some really exciting opportunities for collaboration and co-creation when it comes to engagement with community, as we heard from the EFCL rep today. So for all of those reasons, I'd ask committee to support this so we can advance it to budget and continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Salvador. Please vote.
Sorry, we just had to do something in eScribe. Just give us a minute. That's okay, just give us a minute. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we do apologize. We're having some technical difficulties, and Mayor Soki, you're a member of the committee, but we're having a difficult time adding you to the voting list. But we will capture it if you give us your vote verbally in the minutes.
Yes, I vote yes.
Thank you. And we have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that has carried.
No, my vote is not counted. Is it?
It's not captured there, but we will capture it in the minutes.
Yeah, I just want to know.
We don't know what's happening behind.
You see me in the system. So people listening, I voted yes.
And we will capture that in the minutes. Yeah,
the system is not cooperating with me.
I'm going to take a screenshot that shows that you didn't vote.
Yes.
We do apologize.
Okay, and now we're on to item 7.2.
Councillor Principe, we have some short opening comments if you would like.
Yeah, just short comments would be fine. Thank you.
Sounds great.
This report responds to the council motion from February 2022 asking administration to outline an approach and work plan to establish a digital signage policy, including considerations for impacts of light on the night sky, visibility, wildlife, public health, climate goals, and the effects of digital light on driver distraction. Our approach recognizes there are a number of current trends and opportunities, as well as various impacts of digital signage that must be considered through the development of strategic guidance. Administration will initiate this project and commence it early next year and expect that the work will take approximately 12 to 15 months to complete. And we have a team to support, answer any questions from committee. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I do have questions, but does anyone else have any questions to administration? Councillor Jans?
Thank you. Apologies. So I think this report is this came out of a public hearing where we're having a conversation about digital signage. Am I correct?
Yes.
And I recall the outcome of this was the advocate in question was allowed to pass their proposal, but this was a subsequent motion that we would then go forward and take a look at this in future. And as I reviewed the report, I see it is going to look at a number of the considerations, but if I'm understanding it correctly, the timeline is kind of to do with zoning bylaw renewal, district planning, everything else going forward, and just the enormous amount of workload we have in other planning decisions. Am I correct?
Councillor Jans, yes, you're correct in terms of we've got a number of other major bodies of work on the go, but we do see this as something we can get within our work plan, within our budget for 2023 to 2026.
Okay, so recently there were some discussions about some signage downtown at Subdivision Appeal Board, I believe, or was it a different body?
That's an independent body. I'm not sure if somebody from the team knows if there were. I'm not sure we should contemplate that here.
Okay, yeah. So I think the fact that this broader conversation will take place over the next few years will satisfy some of the public demand and concern around some of these pieces, everything from distracted driving to birds to night sky, etc. So I'm very happy to see the report and to see this come forward. I don't have a subsequent today, knowing that the timeline, it will be considered. So I just wanted to thank admin and staff again for their contemplations here, and also acknowledge that just the technology alone is evolving quickly, as with the brightness and everything else of the opportunities for advertising. So thank you very much to all the staff for pulling this together and I look forward to the conversations with the public.
Thank you, Councillor Jans. I believe Councillor Wright, did you have some questions?
Yes, I did.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, no other committee members are needing to ask questions?
I don't see right now.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, so you don't need a motion then to proceed with this policy development, is that right, Ms. McCabe?
That's correct. No motion isn't required. We will do this work.
Okay, and then what happens in the interim for organizations that are wanting to erect these digital signs?
In the Sorry, great question. I didn't mean to interrupt. In the interim, we'll use our existing policy direction and our existing frameworks to look at individual applications that get advanced to public hearing.
Okay, so they would have to make application for a permit, or like, do they have?
That's correct. Nothing will change in the interim while this work is being done, and perhaps someone from the team could provide some more details on that.
Hello, it's Harry Luke in Development Approvals. Stephanie is correct. We will, in the interim, continue to work with our current zoning bylaw and implement the regulations that are in place now. However, this report will lend to the zoning bylaw renewal as a final product as far as setting policy and providing more predictability with respect to distances of signs, proliferation that have been spoken about within the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Madam Clerk, can you confirm, would Councillor Stevenson be next on the list?
Yes, I believe so. Sorry, we're having some technical issues between
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Stevenson.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, actually, no questions specifically. You know, as Councillor Wright clarified, I understand this work will just proceed as is without further council direction.
That is correct.
Great. Yeah, mainly just want to say fantastic work. I really appreciate all the considerations that you've outlined and really look forward to this guidance coming forward at a future date. Thank you so much for the work on it.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. For myself, I had the same question. And then also just, do we need to be changing the existing bylaw? Is that what will eventually happen?
Councillor, that is a potential outcome of the study. There could be a number of different changes that follow that need to be adjusted to be in alignment with that strategic guidance. So likely that would be the case.
Okay, that was really the question I had. Any other questions or anyone to speak? Actually, you know what, I'll put forward the motion to receive for information. Anyone else to speak or ask questions? All right, I will call the vote. Please vote.
We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the vote. And that has carried. So, Madam Clerk, I'm not sure if we have time to go on to motions pending. Would we at this time try to start one, or should we just maybe make a motion to continue at the next meeting on October 25th, 2022?
So I think that would be up to the will of the committee. We have 10 minutes, but if we want to ensure that the motions are dealt with at the next meeting, because October 11th will be deemed canceled on Thursday due to a decision or a discussion that happened at ARC and there are no agenda items, we would request a unique motion to postpone the motions pending to October 25th to ensure that they're on that agenda. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody, but.
I just want to check with Councillor Salvador. Are these motions, would you prefer to start one today? These are
I
your
think
motions.
we can get started on one today, see how far we get. I'm
That
okay with
sounds
that.
great. Okay, so how about if we go ahead? I will see no responses to councillor inquiries, and no private reports, so let's go on to item 10.1.
Yeah, so I'll move that administration provide options and analysis to ensure area redevelopment plans are in closer alignment with city plan, with consideration of repealing or amending existing area redevelopment plans as part of the district planning process. Perfect, and great, the wording is up there. And I'll do a brief introduction if that's okay. Wonderful. Yeah, so this motion is actually in response to some of the concerns we heard from speakers back at the September 13th public hearing when we were discussing Metro 78. At the time, many speakers pointed to confusion and some misalignment between existing ARPs, the city plan, and district planning. We heard through conversation and answers from city admin that we need to be clear with Edmontonians about plan hierarchy and ultimately need to get to a place where all subsidiary plans are well aligned with city plan. And I absolutely think we can get there through district planning, but I do feel that direction is needed in order for this to be addressed. Area redevelopment plans, of course, have many good features, and there are components of them which should be incorporated into district plans. That makes sense. But what doesn't quite make sense is where we have aged plans that are technically still in effect, but practically they are outdated. And Edmontonians arrive at public hearing confused about why we would support a mid-rise building next to an LRT station. The fact that community experiences confusion and, I'll say, false expectations around urban growth like that on a regular basis is a negative pattern of communication. We're essentially telling folks we support growth and densification, but this plan remains accurate until we change it. So refer to the plan, but actually we're really referencing city plan. So this inevitably causes some conflict. And part of this, I think, is because we're in a strange transitional period right now where the tools for implementing city plan, zoning bylaw renewal, district planning, and growth management are in flux. So I was compelled to make this motion today because I think it's critical that we get this right as we're going through the district planning process. I think it's fantastic that we caught this early so that we can make adjustments sooner rather than later. And it's in large part thanks to the speakers who pointed this inconsistency out the week before last. Yeah, and I want to thank Councillor Stevenson as well for her collaboration on this motion and for flagging it at the public hearing. So that's it for an intro, thanks, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Salvador. Do we have a due date on that?
I would defer to administration.
We would suggest Q1 2023.
Q1 2023.
Great, thank you for that. Councillor Stevenson, go ahead.
You know, I'd really just speak to it if now's the appropriate time. If no one
I
else
think it's the appropriate time. Yeah, it looks like there are no other questions. You go ahead, Councillor Stevenson.
Excellent. Well, you know, really echoing what Councillor Salvador has just outlined, I agree that providing that clarity for Edmontonians about how they can expect their neighborhoods to grow and change in the coming years is so critically important. And we heard a lot at the last public hearing about broken trust, communities feeling betrayed, that the word of the city couldn't be believed. That's very problematic. It's challenging in terms of building community and building trust. It makes it difficult for us to build out the city of the future that we want to see. I think the district planning process is an absolutely fantastic opportunity to provide greater clarity to communities and help people through the difficult process of change. It is hard when the places that we love change, and removing some of that uncertainty that I think compounds some of those challenges will go a long way in helping us achieve our visions. So looking forward to the report coming back, looking forward to some bold recommendations about how we can align our planning frameworks and provide the clarity that our communities are asking for. So thank you so much to Councillor Salvador, and thank you to city staff for taking this on. Looking forward to reading the report when it comes back.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Salvador, to close.
Nothing further.
All right, so I will call the vote, please.
We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that is carried. All right, well, I would suggest we move on then to 10.2 and let's see where we get.
All right.
Councillor Salvador, go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Principe. So I'll move that administration provide a report to committee that outlines options and analysis for accelerating the redevelopment of surface parking lots in Center City, including options for phasing out surface parking lots that do not contain a development permit, and a due date of Q2 2023.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Salvador.
And I'll just take a brief moment to introduce this one as well. Yeah, so we have a significant number of surface parking lots in our downtown core, many of which do not contain a development permit. And I was actually first made aware of this back in 2014 when an article by Elise Stolte was written about unpermitted surface parking lots in our core. More recently, just a few weeks ago at public hearing, we had a lengthy discussion about surface parking lots just north of Rogers Place and in the Ice District. And at the time we were discussing when we would essentially revoke the applicant's permit to operate as a surface parking lot, because we know eventually we want to see surface parking lots phased out of our downtown. Now that's the correct way to operate. You know, you're supposed to have a permit to operate a parking lot, but I'm concerned that we continue to have an unacceptably high number of lots without permits, which are essentially vacant land, even though their property is being used as a revenue generating parking lot. So yeah, the understanding is that parking lots need to have a development permit to be considered a use, and I think it's important that through this motion we're going to be able to gain a better understanding of how pervasive unpermitted lots are and what steps we can take to either make them compliant or accelerate their redevelopment, because there are many landowners who are operating in good faith and have their permit. So again, I don't think it's acceptable that we've had operators for a decade or longer existing without one. And just a few points for why I think this is worthy of investigation. We talk a lot about creating a vibrant downtown and a safe downtown. And surface parking lots are not doing us any favors in that regard. We want our downtown to be a walkable, bustling, safe place where people want to spend time. And I feel quite strongly that phasing out unpermitted surface parking lots is part of that conversation. We're also in a very challenging fiscal position right now. And we need to be thinking about how we can get higher and better uses out of vacant and underutilized land in our central core. And that does not necessarily mean towers on every site, but it does mean actively taking steps to realize the vision outlined for Center City in the city plan, which includes a mix of mid-rise and high-rise buildings. Now, I would say that we as a city have taken steps, and I'll just point towards the quarters, where we've invested tens of millions of dollars into infrastructure upgrades, a beautiful park space, high-quality public realm. We were the first mover in that instance, and the quarters CRL is counting on increased development to pay that back. So yeah, the financial position of the quarter CRL is quite concerning to me. I see I'm running out of time. There's obviously a fairness perspective here as well. I'll just end there because I'm totally out. Thank you, Councillor Principe.
Yeah, no problem. I just thought we were going to have to delay this or postpone it to the next one. So I just thought I would let you carry on. Now we have time. We'll have to bring forward a motion to refer, would that be the correct terminology, or postpone to the next UPC?
Or there could be a motion to extend orders briefly, but it would be up to the will of committee.
It might go, you know what, it might go a little bit longer than we think.
I personally just have one very quick question.
I might have a few.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So.
I'll move to extend orders.
So that motion does take precedence.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we would need to vote on that. And is the motion to extend orders to complete the agenda or for a certain period of time?
The problem is I have another commitment right away that I'll have to be going to, so I will not be able to chair the meeting then.
Okay, and we will lose quorum.
We'll lose quorum. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if that's okay,
so if
we'll
we just have a motion to postpone this item?
Yes, please.
Motion on the floor.
I withdraw my previous motion and move that.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette and Councillor Salvador. Thank you for understanding.
So we're just drafting that motion quickly.
So do we vote at this point? Is the motion on the floor?
Almost. Give us 2 seconds. We're just drafting it right now.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Please vote.
And we have all the votes.
Should I? You have the votes?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Please display the vote. Great, that has carried. So I believe that means we are adjourned for today. Thank you, everyone.